Chapter 320. Luonan raised his head in astonishment. He didn't quite understand. Shuelei continued. The gym master needs to rest for a period of time after moving. The gym doesn't need my help for the time being. The society I'm a member of isn't that interesting. You might as well tell Brother Ping to transfer me over. Wouldn't it be better if we looked after each other? Luonan subconsciously said. Having someone look after each other is good. Right now, the ownership of gear was still in the midst of a bidding war. It didn't matter if the Mystic Arts Research Society won in the end, or if the Construction Society took over. Luonan was alone and powerless. He had a trustworthy friend to help him. Hold on. How was this a matter of looking out for each other? Luonan understood Shuelei's thoughts. Shuelei was rushing to be his bodyguard. He admitted that if Shuelei really did protect him, he would be able to make up for the weakness of his body. Coupled with his mental attacks and other methods, he would have no problem getting through tonight's situation. However, Luonan was even more clear on the fact that trouble would not come in the future. If trouble really did come, then it would not be the same as today. It's not just the two of us. Leicester, there are many other situations here. There's also your parents, my aunt's family. Luonan's voice was low. He spoke and spoke, but then his voice was cut off. After his impassioned emotions returned, a myriad of thoughts unavoidably grew in his mind like weeds. Frankly speaking, the HQ's investigation team's tricks had truly shocked him. Forcibly arresting, taking hostages, burning houses. This group of people had no scruples at all. They could do anything. And this was just headquarters. Luonan did not forget that Quantum Corporation, especially Yen Yonghua, had always coveted gear, regardless of their motives. The order of justice seemed to have shrunk back for now, but headquarters was so proactive. As the parties involved, would they really act like ostriches? There were also the various powers that Luonan could not clearly count. He could see from the chaos created by the human-faced arachnid that there were far too many greedy people. It was hard to say when someone would jump out. How were he and Shuelei going to deal with them? Fine, there was also the Xia City branch. But from today's situation, it was better to beg for help than to beg for help. Even if He Yuan and the others did their best to rescue him, they were limited by time and space. It was impossible for them to appear in front of him in the first instance, let alone his family. Luonan did not know how to express his worries to Shuelei for a time. At this moment, Tianxi walked out of the fitting room after changing her clothes. Now was not a good time to pick out clothes, so Tianxi just chose a nearby women's clothing brand and casually matched it. Perhaps it was really cold after falling into the pool. She wore a woolen coat with a turtleneck and a white sweater, which covered her upper body well. She was wearing a dark pleated dress that hung all the way down to her ankles. She was also wearing a pair of high-heeled Oxford shoes that she had bought earlier. She was sweating a little in the warm shopping mall. Her long hair was still damp, and her cheeks were slightly red, as if she had just taken a shower. Tianxi walked step by step until she was before Luonan. Her eyes drooped, and she spoke softly. "I've kept you waiting." Luonan didn't say anything. The matter of Shuelei transferring to the Order Club wasn't something that could be settled just by talking about it. He closed his notebook and stood up. "Let's go." Mr. Luo. Zhou Hu, who had just gone out, rushed over and handed him a pair of brown glasses that had just been opened. "Your eyes should be covered first." Shuelei came to a sudden realization. "Those patterns are quite horrifying. I should cover them." No wonder He Yuan chose Zhou Hu to be her bodyguard. He really was a very careful and thorough person. Luonan expressed his thanks, took the glasses and put them on. He walked toward the elevator first, and Shuelei and the others followed him. The devil ray spiraled silently in the crystal pillar behind them, following them down. According to the original plan, Luonan would be admitted to the hospital for an examination after he returned. But Luonan had just spoken to Xie Junping about the matter of the devil ray, so he had to go to the party scene to see the specific situation. Zhou Hu, who was following by his side, had no objections to this. The group soon returned to the 88th floor. According to the schedule of the party, it was time for the warm-up to end and for the party to officially begin. But by the time Luonan and the others arrived, The area surrounding the central crystal pillar was clearly a bit chaotic. Buzzing sounds lingered in their ears. Luonan contacted Xie Junping, and Xie Junping informed him. A skylight has been opened in the crystal pillar. Nothing like this has ever happened since the building was completed. Many events have been postponed for the sake of safety. Yao Sir lost face and is cursing right now. Wait a moment. Xie Junping and Hu Huaying were still conversing with Yao Feng. They were unable to get away for a while. Luonan swept his gaze around. It was quite a coincidence that the entrance to the elevator they took happened to be near the sofa corner where they first met Yao Feng and He Donglu. There was no trace of the troublesome characters at this time. There were only 2 or 3 strangers sitting there chatting. The sofa corner was quite spacious. There was no problem in resting and discussing. Luonan mentioned this to Xie Junping and led Shuelei and the others over. They prepared to rest there for a while, and wait for Xie Junping and the others to come over and rendezvous. Luonan and the others turned left, but there was a group of people on the right. They just happened to see them come out of the elevator. Someone immediately let out a strange cry. Heavenly thunder and earthly fire. How fierce. They even changed their clothes. What kind of scene is this? There were 2 of them when they went, but 4 came back. Wow. You can't judge a book by its cover. Zhu Maoxuan's expression grew uglier and uglier as he listened to his friends' chatter. Most of them were pointing at Tianxi. Their group had been frightened by Black-Tooth Sunglasses Man. Their drive had been dampened, and they ran out from the 124th floor. It was quite humiliating. They recovered with great difficulty and went up again. But when they pressed the button, a white-collar worker's face was covered in blood. His head was nearly smashed flat, and he had sunk into a deep coma. This gave them yet another shock. They didn't know what had happened up there. Then the police got involved, and the group had no choice but to return to the party venue. The party activities had gone awry. It could be said that their journey was not smooth. Just as they were feeling vexed, they suddenly saw Luonan and Tianxi return. They looked like they had seen a ghost. Zhu Maoxuan began to grind his teeth. His friends, who were close to him, saw that his eyes were bloodshot and that he had the appearance of a butcher. Each and every one of them shut their mouths. It made sense when they thought about it. Their relationship had been established, and their clothes had been changed. If Zhu Maoxuan were to get jealous now, wouldn't that be the same as wearing an oily green hat on his head? Zhu Maoxuan stared at the backs of the 2 people. He didn't move. It would only be more humiliating to tear them apart today. But after today, things would be different. Let's go. Zhu Maoxuan forcefully swallowed his anger, turned around and left. There were dozens of sharp thoughts stabbing back and forth in his mind. He was just waiting for an opportunity to vent them out. Zhu Maoxuan had just turned around when Zhou Hu and Shuelei, who had already hidden themselves in the stream of people, turned their heads to glance at him. It was a sensitive time. They obviously sensed such malicious gazes. Zhou Hu even moved closer to Luonan's ear and asked, "That person?" Luonan shook his head. As long as Zhu Maoxuan didn't immediately rush over to fight, Luonan didn't have the leisure to pay attention to him. They arrived at the corner of the sofa in a few steps. Luonan wasn't polite. He made a slight gesture and sat down first. His back was pressed against the soft sofa, and he had something to lean on. The feeling of exhaustion was like evaporating steam. It enveloped his entire body in an instant, evaporating all his strength. He unconsciously sighed. He was a bit tired. Nanster? Shuelei didn't sit. He bent over to look at the color of Luonan's face. He was a bit worried. Luonan raised his eyelids and looked at Shuelei's wrinkled face. He laughed involuntarily. The mind comes before the energy. The energy comes before the strength. The weight of exhaustion comes after that. It looks like I've passed today. These were the words of advice that Shuelei had given him when he first began to learn the cultivation technique of the eye's orifice. Luonan had indeed put these words into practice when he faced the enemy today. He didn't consume too much of his strength, but the comprehension and application of order frames, gear coupling, and other concepts consumed an extreme amount of energy. In addition, he had returned to rescue his mother's work. His impatience and surging emotions had damaged his mind. In a safe environment, the accumulated feelings of exhaustion exploded forth. He really wanted to sleep. Shuelei was probably the one who could understand Luo Nan's state the most. He advised, "Why don't you just sleep for a bit? The damage to your mind will damage your essence and energy. Forcefully holding on is a bottomless pit." Let me clarify a few things first. Sister, he should be here soon. Luo Nan thought about the fact that there was an outsider beside him. He forced his eyelids open and turned to Tianxi. "Senior Sister Tian, I'm sorry for today. I've let you suffer a calamity. However, it's all in the past now. You should be safe for the time being. If Senior Sister you..." Before Luo Nan could express his meaning clearly, an aura came from behind him. A snow-white leg strode over from the back of the sofa. It nimbly crossed over the back of the sofa, and a slender figure suddenly appeared. She wore a very simple t-shirt paired with denim shorts. Autumn was thick, and she wore summer clothes. She was quite willful. There was only one person Luo Nan was familiar with who could dress like this. Zhang Yingying. "What are you looking at?" "I rushed over from the seaside. I didn't wear a diving suit. I'm doing you justice. Of course, if you die, I'll change into a suit and collect your corpse." Zhang Yingying sat down next to Luo Nan. She stared at him unwaveringly, carefully sizing him up to see if he was missing any parts. Luo Nan's eyes were nearly unable to blink. He didn't pay much attention to her. He just grunted. If this were any other day, Zhang Yingying would have jumped up a long time ago. But today, she just snorted coldly. She extended her hand and probed Luo Nan's forehead. Her fingertips slid down, and she measured his carotid artery, heart rate, and so on. There was nothing abnormal about this, but Luo Nan's face looked awkward no matter how she looked at it. She sized him up a few times, and she finally discovered a problem. "Why are you wearing glasses?" She reached out to take them off as she spoke. Luo Nan shot a glance at her, and saw her face turn stiff. Her eyes seemed to be a bit lifeless. "Is it that ugly?" Luo Nan took back his glasses and suddenly felt that something was wrong. This was because his heart lantern of the eye's orifice had subconsciously shone over a moment ago. Zhang Yingying's life sketches were more or less clear to Luo Nan that night at Frost River Reality. Now that the heart lantern naturally shone, Luo Nan was able to see through everything. Chapter 321. Bai Hong's condition was very interesting. Luo Nan's mind stirred when he saw Zhang Yingying's special body and soul structure. Before he could fully comprehend it, another person entered the corner of the sofa. A slightly panting voice rang out. "Boss Luo, your rhythm is too strange. We can't keep up with it." As he spoke, Papercut's slightly plump body sat down hard, swaying on the sofa. As for Red Fox, he didn't say a word. He just sat on the armrest of the sofa next to Papercut. His gaze swept across Luo Nan's body, going back and forth a few times as he sized him up in detail. Back at Gear, 99% of Luo Nan's mental energy was used to put out the fire. However, he knew very well that these two people who had once been at odds with him were the first to rush to the scene. Their attitudes were impeccable. Luo Nan also accepted this favor. He immediately nodded towards the two and took the opportunity to shift his gaze from Zhang Yingying. He temporarily set aside the matter of Bai Hong and put on his glasses. Zhang Yingying was a little confused. She wasn't too clear on what had just happened, but after hearing Papercut's words, she instinctively mocked. "You mean to say that he should wait for us to collect his corpse?" As she spoke, she tapped her wristband, telling Papercut to pay attention to the time. Papercut pointed at Zhang Yingying and then pointed back at himself. He was speechless at this sort of self-destructive evaluation. Zhang Yingying didn't have the self-awareness to self-destruct. No matter what, she had followed Luo Nan halfway through his fight with those people from headquarters. She had provided him with intelligence and information. It was better than nothing. This group of people could be considered to be quite familiar with each other, so there was no pressure in arguing with each other. She had been tense for a long time tonight. After confirming that Luo Nan was fine, it was proper for her to recuperate and relax. But on the other hand, as the only normal person, Tianxi was very uncomfortable with the sudden appearance of these people. The ring-shaped sofa was mostly closed up. There was only one entrance, forming a relatively private space. Tianxi sat at one end of the entrance. Papercut and Red Fox, who came later, sat at the other end. The distance between them was very close, but there was no communication between them, not even a glance. Tianxi's head was slightly lowered, and her legs were together and slanted. She had a dignified bearing, but half of her body was outside, just like her current situation. As time passed, as the most outstanding self-protection mechanism of human beings, forgetfulness began to play its role. The nightmarish experience gradually became blurry, and Tianxi also pulled herself out of her trance and fear state. Her mind began to work again. The 88th floor was the venue of the Pingjiang district's first-rate school fellowship party. The participants were divided into a few age groups, but their basic identities were students. Among the people who arrived at the sofa corner one after the other, Luo Nan and Xue Lei aside, there was only one person who looked a bit like a student. It was the long-legged beauty who glowed with youth. As for the other three, they gave off a strong aura of society. Zhou Hu, whom he had met before, was a 40-year-old uncle. These people surrounded Luo Nan. They were incompatible with the surrounding environment, but they themselves were quite harmonious. They naturally formed a circle. When they sat down, the students who had been whispering in the corner of the sofa felt inexplicably uncomfortable. They quickly got up and left. These people were Yi and San, and they said, "They and." They Xiao Yi Xiao said, "By, were these people like Luo Nan and Puppeteer? Powerful people with inconceivable abilities? These Bai He of Yin had Chun, Bai Mo, Tian Tian Yang, of Hua, Tian He." Tianxi couldn't help but guess. The circle she was in contact with was far from the campus or shallow political circle she was familiar with. It was so far that she couldn't understand it. It was even more daunting. Tianxi was adjusting her thoughts when a topic suddenly fell on her. The long-legged beauty, who looked to be a few years younger than her, turned her gaze over. "This is the female lead of the first half of the story? She's really not bad. Speaking of which, you seem to have a crush on your sister. How come you've never been a virgin with a younger woman?" Luo Nan rolled his eyes even though he was extremely sleepy after hearing these nonsensical words. Tianxi was quite embarrassed by Zhang Yingying's words. Her emotions stimulated her memories. She suddenly remembered that it was this voice that made Luo Nan abandon her in the very beginning. He wanted to cast aside his burden. Tianxi knew that she shouldn't get angry with these powerful people, but she was targeted time and time again. This stimulated her self-esteem from the bottom of her heart. Of course, she wouldn't use an intense method to express it. She just lowered her eyes and sat upright on the end of the sofa. She was calmer and more reserved than before. Her delicate bearing was the most obvious weakness. It was very likely to arouse the protective hearts of the opposite sex. Luo Nan remembered Tianxi mentioning coupling theory. He naturally spoke a few words to help her. "Don't joke around. Senior sister Tian is a top student of our school's design institute. She'll be studying next year. It's very likely that she'll be my mother's direct junior sister." "Oh, Master's aunt. You can't just be an outsider. We share blessings and misfortunes together." Zhang Yingying giggled. Her eyes contained a hidden meaning. "Do you understand what I mean?" "I understand. Why wouldn't I understand? If you hadn't interrupted me just now, I would have already invited her away, okay?" No matter what their respective attitudes were, Luo Nan and Zhang Yingying had already reached a consensus. The matter they were about to discuss was far too sensitive. Letting Tianxi stay here would do no good to either of them. Luo Nan roused his spirits and cast his gaze toward Tianxi. "Senior sister Tian, you've been tossing and turning quite a bit just now. I'm sure you're tired. It's fine if you don't participate in this party. Go back and rest." His words were more of an order than a concern. Tianxi's mind went blank. She didn't know if she was relieved or regretful. She was just about to nod when the man in the red jacket, who had remained silent all this time, suddenly spoke. "The secretary opened a ward at Sacred Heart Hospital. You should go there and get your body examined to avoid any sequelae." Tianxi was stupefied for a moment before she realized that he was speaking to her. She very consciously cast her gaze toward Luo Nan. She wanted to see his attitude. Luonan was also puzzled. He looked at Red Fox, and the corner of Red Fox's lips twitched. You can call this procedure. Zhang Yingying immediately changed her position. She sneered. If procedures were useful, then this wouldn't have happened. Oh right, where's Secretary He? She's the one who called the meeting. Why is she late? She should be at the hospital. Papercut was afraid that Red Fox and Zhang Yingying would quarrel again. He rushed to interrupt and asked Luonan. Speaking of which, what did you come here for? Did you have to wait until the party ended? I was waiting for news. Luonan briefly mentioned the matter of the Devil Ray. I was thinking that it would be safer to have that thing by my side. I really didn't know that you were actually a rich person. Zhang Yingying's eyes went wide. She had a very surprised appearance. Of course, this was sarcasm. Papercut scratched his head as well. Nanster, I'm not saying this, but the mutants on the market have never been sold for less than 10 million. According to the market price of this Devil Ray. Before Luonan could finish speaking, Xie Junping's loud voice reached everyone's ears. Nanster, are you okay? Xie Junping and Hu Huaying hurriedly walked over. Xie Junping saw that there were many figures in the corner of the sofa, vaguely resembling Luonan. Xie Junping didn't think too much about it, and simply asked. The words came out of his mouth, but he discovered that 6 or 7 pairs of eyes had cast their gazes over. All of them were unfamiliar faces. No, there was one who looked more familiar. Zhang Yingying? Yo Sheep's head. Hello. Zhang Yingying giggled as she waved her hand. She turned to express her admiration for Luonan for the second time. You actually let him go negotiate the price with someone. Before Luonan could speak, Xie Junping exploded first. What do you mean by actually? Zhang Yingying rubbed her fingers. How much? Xie Junping's voice immediately lowered an octave. 60 million. Zhang Yingying spread her hands. Red Fox, who was sitting furthest away, withdrew his legs to make a path. He indicated for Xie Junping and Hu Huaying to go in and sit. He even opened his mouth to evaluate. The price is quite fair. Papercut also said, the ghost-faced electric eel we caught at 8 Rocks Reef last year was more or less the same price. It was sold for 40 million. However, the Devil Ray can be used both in the air and in the water. The price is hard to estimate. Zhang Yingying shrugged. What are you guys discussing with such a serious face? In any case, a certain someone can't afford it. Even if he could, he wouldn't be able to raise it. That's true. Papercut turned his head to look at the Devil Ray swimming mightily within the central crystal pillar. This mutant had been swimming in the nearby waters ever since Luonan sat here. It had never left. But in this way, the shoal of fish suffered a calamity. The strength of a mutant with a strengthened body is directly proportional to its appetite. It can eat several tons of fresh meat in a day. It's very hard to provide for it. I need it. Luonan stared at the Devil Ray. His voice was low. The effectiveness of my order frame can only manifest on the mental plane. I need an external device like the Devil Ray to be able to have some influence on the material plane. Red Fox repeated these 2 words. He didn't understand what an order frame was, but his chest felt stifled. Right now, he was the only one who had to go to the hospital for an examination besides Luonan. Out of everyone present, Zhang Yingying was the first person to come into contact with the concept of order frames, gears, and coupling. She had been mulling over it all this time. She seemed to understand it, but she wasn't. Now that she heard Luonan mention this concept, it was as if electricity had suddenly passed through her mind. A light bulb lit up. The Devil Ray is an exoskeleton to you? Luonan was stunned. He answered. You can say that. Zhang Yingying's thoughts were clear. Her thoughts spun in succession. For you, the Devil Ray is just a module or a plug-in. The order frame is the energy source and overall control system? How do you do it? Luonan was very happy to explain a few related theories, especially when Zhang Yingying's description was very reliable. He immediately said, the generation, transmission, and output of energy and information are produced by the coupling of gears. Of course, gears themselves can produce. No, what I mean is, this is your first time seeing a mutant Devil Ray. How do you make it work for you? How do you make it do whatever you want? Zhang Yingying stared at him with wide eyes. Is your true ability similar to that of a puppeteer, a beast tamer, and so on? Or are you a mind controller? Red Fox raised his eyebrows in the sofa corner when he heard the last 3 words. Papercut grimaced in pain. Zhou Hu looked pensive. The others all had blank expressions. What's a mind controller? Chapter 322. Hearing Luo Nen use the theory of gears and order frames to explain Ouyang Chen's great work, the group of people in the corner of the sofa blinked, furrowed their brows and scratched their heads. Their expressions were all different, but they couldn't avoid making eye contact. The atmosphere became even more bizarre. Zhang Yingying relied on the flash of inspiration, just now to barely keep up with Luo Nan's train of thought. She casually tugged at a strand of hair and asked, according to what you're saying, President Ouyang is using the heaven and earth. Yes, the spatial structure as an exoskeleton to control? The explanation of formatting theory is that the self-format distorts the heaven and earth format. Perhaps the heaven and earth format can also be explained as the coupling relationship of several relatively independent gear sets. President Ouyang has changed their originally distant spacetime distribution. Luo Nan suddenly froze when he spoke to this point. Several seconds passed before he spoke in a low voice. It's the spacetime distribution. Through this method, the lag brought about by the spacetime distribution can be reduced. Here we go again. Zhang Yingying rubbed her forehead with her hand and sighed silently. Luo Nan's state of talking to himself was very satisfying to disgust his enemies, but it was far too heartless to use it on his own people. Fortunately, this state did not persist for too long. Luo Nan raised his head and twisted his face to look her straight in the eye. His brows even furrowed. That mind controller. Is he the same as a psychic? As long as you set your mind to someone, there will be no end to the trouble? Papercut spat out with a puff. Zhang Yingying's mind spun. Oh, it really is like this. In a thousandth of an instant, she really did feel a little apologetic. Then she chuckled as she extended her elbow and placed it on Luo Nan's shoulder. Half of her body moved closer to him, and she adopted the attitude of a brother. Don't make random associations. Speaking of which, the spacetime distribution of gear sets is a very interesting way of saying it. Hey, isn't this the information that the people from headquarters want to know? Is it really okay for you to say it like this? I'm not saying it because some people have terrible attitudes. Luo Nen didn't believe that the logic world was some sort of secret. Perhaps An Wang's actions could barely be considered a secret, but He Yuan had never warned him about this matter. The people from headquarters simply didn't have the patience to ask. Zhang Yingying pursed her lips. You make it sound so easy. I asked the boss about An Wang's matter, but she didn't explain it in detail. That might be because she doesn't understand formatting theory. Luo Nan knew that the boss Zhang Yingying spoke of was the illustrious and famous Her Majesty Empress Wu. But out of a subtle thought, he still made a joke. From what I can see, the facts are quite clear. It was President Ouyang's actions that gave An Wang convenience. He took the opportunity to lock onto a place that was originally very far away. He took a shortcut and jumped over. No one could truly understand his formatting theory and coupling theory, but his descriptions were logical and clear. Zhang Yingying and the others could imagine what would happen. Luo Nen didn't want to be labeled as a mind controller in his muddle-headedness. He had no concept of this title at all, so he asked, what's the occupation of a mind controller? It can be considered as an advanced level of hypnotist. They specialize in manipulating people's minds and are highly sought after in the various orders. The weaker ones can be in charge of preaching and preaching. The stronger ones can become the core priests. And there are a few who can directly become the leader of the order. By the way, we haven't had this lesson yet. The one who spoke wasn't in the circle of sofas. Instead, it was Bamboo Pole, who had just walked into the corner of the sofa. He was an expert in the study of secret orders. He had given Luo Nen the shorthand of the important people of the world course. The strong ones of the various major orders were a very important component. Luo Nen shook his head. He had no impression of them. He saw He Yuan at this time. She was by Bamboo Pole's side, but he felt that she was a bit quiet and low-key. Luo Nan's forelimbs were weak right now. His body's reactions were slow by half a beat. He could only wave his hand at the two who had arrived as a greeting. Shuelei, who was by his side, instinctively stood up to give his seat. He was worried that He Yuan and the others would be polite, so he simply jumped over the back of the sofa and went to the back. Since this was the case, He Yuan thanked Shuelei and passed through the aisle of the sofa. She and Zhang Yingying just happened to sit on Luo Nan's left and right. The sofa was soft, and the three sat very close to each other. It was quite crowded. As for Bamboo Pole, he didn't join in the fun. He simply walked over to the bar in the corner of the sofa and occupied one of the only two seats. He asked for a martini and beamed as he watched the group of people rub against each other on the circular sofa. Papercut was a bit regretful when he saw this. He also wanted to have a drink or two. He got up and said in a loud voice, "Give me a rum and coke." Bamboo Pole shook his head. "Save a seat. Cragburst will be here in a bit. With his size, he shouldn't be tormenting you guys." Then he waved his hand at Shuelei, who was behind the sofa. "Leister, how about a cup? It's not even a bit yet." Shuelei wasn't at the age to drink alcohol, and public places were the strictest. He could only politely decline this sort of pastime. Shuelei walked behind Xie Junping and Hu Huaying as he spoke. The topic of discussion and the strange atmosphere had stupefied the two rich kids. They instinctively let out a breath of relief when they saw Shuelei come over. Xie Junping asked in a low voice, "These are all?" Shuelei didn't know how to respond for a time. Papercut, who was sitting next to them, put on a smiling face. "We're of the same profession in the society. Yes, we're just like your Mystic Arts Research Society. Our fields are pretty much the same." Xie Junping went ah twice. It was unknown what he was thinking, but his expression was strange. On the other side, He Yuan spoke in a low voice after sitting down for a few seconds. "I'm sorry, Mr. Luo. This situation has occurred because of my negligence in my work." Luo Nan didn't say anything. He wasn't angry at He Yuan, but it was absolutely impossible for him to say, "It's okay" at this time. In the end, he still minded. How could he not mind? After experiencing headquarters' shameless methods, Luo Nan's mind was filled with the question of how he should respond when the next wave of enemies arrived. It wasn't just him alone. There was also his aunt and uncle, his relatives and friends living in Xia City, and even Gear, who couldn't be moved. All sorts of fetters had to be taken care of. No matter how one looked at it, it was an impossible task. Before the train of thought was clear, a person's thoughts would naturally trace back to the past. All sorts of if, maybe, if, then, and so on, along with the corresponding emotions of complaint, regret, and so on. Luo Nan didn't have the mental strength to imagine things that didn't happen, but those fuzzy emotions still existed more or less. Following He Yuan's straightforward apology, they were like bad wine that hadn't finished fermenting. They broke through the walls of the barrel and splashed out. He didn't have the leisure to ponder over his words. He spoke bluntly. "I need a solution. Me. My family. My mother's blood and sweat. That group of scum. They can do anything." He had said these words to Shuelei. He had said them to himself. Now he was saying them to He Yuan. In the beginning, he was speaking rationally. Now he was venting his emotions. He Yuan responded in a deep voice. "President Ouyang has already sealed off headquarters maintenance authority on the psychic wave network. Gong Qi and his group will leave Xia City tomorrow morning." Luo Nan wanted to continue listening, but the words were cut off. He turned his head to stare at her. "And then?" "The branch is currently researching the relevant security plan. I'm fully responsible for the specific matters. Over." The sofa corner immediately sank into an absurd silence. Luo Nan was stunned. He only spoke after a while. "That's it? What about the specific actions? Staffing? Are there any guarantees? This sort of thing." Papercut saw that the situation was far from good. He instinctively acted as a peacemaker. "Nanster, it's not that the secretary isn't doing her best. It's just that the unrestricted warfare of ability users against ordinary people is a worldwide problem. The types are ever-changing. It's impossible to prepare a contingency plan. The secretary says that she's fully responsible. She'll certainly shoulder it. Everyone will do their utmost, right? Papercut's intentions were good, but Luo Nan's heart sank the more he listened. He absolutely didn't doubt He Yuan's sense of responsibility, but this feeling of not necessarily being effective even if they tried their best seemed to be heading toward the worst possible outcome. Luo Nan understood clearly that if he were to have the thought to kill any ordinary person in Xia City right now, he would probably need Ouyang Chun and Her Majesty Empress Wu, who he could not understand, to protect him from the side. Only then would he be able to defend himself. Aside from this, any conventional security measures would be meaningless. It would be useless even if He Yuan mobilized the army to surround the target so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. There were perhaps very few ability users who possessed methods like his, but there was no lack of powerhouses at the same level or higher. There was even the Order of Justice and Quantum Corporation. Powerhouses from various places would converge. Wouldn't the corresponding methods be ever-changing? All right, how did he end up standing on the opposite side of these powers? Luo Nan only had a vague answer in his mind. He wasn't willing to hastily come to a conclusion. He just took a deep breath, leaned his upper body forward, and rested his elbows on his knees for support. He hung his head in contemplation. No one followed up after Papercut's terrible consolation. There was another long period of silence, so long that it was suffocating. Speaking of which, there were no misunderstandings between them. But because of the enormous difference in the pressure they bore, they lost the foundation for deep communication, making it hard for this topic to continue. But there were some things that could not be avoided. Luo Nan was a member of the society, but the society was unable to give him help and protection. The upper echelons of the society even persecuted him. The difference between the branch and headquarters, or a promise or two, was not enough to fill this absurd crack. As for He Yuan, she didn't want to say much. Ever since she arrived at the society, she had always been in charge of confidential work. She tried to change the situation of the society, leaking information everywhere. But strictly speaking, the leak of Luo Nan's information and headquarters actions were all her responsibility. It was also her greatest setback after retiring from the military. She had to reflect. And so the two sat shoulder to shoulder. One was ramrod straight, and the other was stooped. They both sat quietly. The others looked at each other in dismay, finding it harder and harder to open their mouths. Oh, it's only been a while, but it's getting lively. A sudden external force shattered the wall of silence in the sofa corner. A rather eye-catching group of people entered this dusky corner along with the sound. He Donglu wore a well-ironed military uniform, yet he was hugging two beauties on his left and right. He brought along two beautiful women who were just flower vases as he walked over. Behind him followed an old driver who had maintained his silence all this time. He should be a bodyguard or something. As for the other martial artist, Feng Jiejun, and his female companion, they were nowhere to be seen. He Donglu played around the venue for a bit. He quite liked the atmosphere in the sofa corner. It was just right for him to play a few games with the flower vases. But when he came back, he couldn't help but be stunned when he saw the dense mass of people. This place could indeed fit a few more people, but it seemed like it was no longer suitable to play games. Tizke. What a disappointment. In order to create an atmosphere, there were practically no lighting facilities in the sofa corner. The watery blue light pouring over from the crystal pillar in the center was the brightest source of light. The first person He Donglu recognized was Shuelei, who was behind the sofa. That size very appropriately stimulated his memories. He remembered that this big guy had nearly gotten into a conflict with his follower just now. He recognized Shuelei, and his gaze shot down. He also saw Xie Junping and Hu Huaying along the way. They all knew each other. He Donglu grinned and used his chin to point in the distance. You guys also know the benefits of this place? Come. Make some space. This party is really boring. It's just that the quality of the girls is okay. His words caused the two flower vases to pout coquettishly and laugh. On the side of the ring-shaped sofa, Xie Junping and Hu Huaying glanced at each other and stood up at the same time. Xie Junping called out, "Young Master He, we just so happened to meet. This place is too crowded. Let's go somewhere else. It's here. What's a little crowded? At this time we should squeeze a little. How could he Donglu be easily persuaded by others? Moreover, at this time he saw Tianxi sitting upright with her eyes drooped at the entrance of the ring-shaped hair ring. Her dignified and elegant bearing was precisely the kind he admired the most. It just so happened that this side was relatively empty. He Donglu didn't care about the capacity of the ring-shaped sofa that was almost full. He hugged the 2 flower vases and walked inside. Naturally, he walked to Tianxi's side. He Donglu could be carefree, but the old driver behind him had to fulfill his duty. As he spoke, the latter had already keenly sensed that something was wrong. Sweeping his gaze, he also saw a familiar person first. Zhouhu. The old driver opened his mouth, wanting to speak. At this time, a cold and clear gaze shot over from the other side. The instant he made contact with the gaze, he immediately stood at attention and shut his mouth. Although he Donglu wasn't considered a proper hoodlum, he already had thoughts of hunting. As he passed through the inner aisle of the sofa, he deliberately rubbed against Tianxi's legs, which were wrapped in her long skirt. He revealed a smiling face and said, "Excuse me, beautiful." Tianxi knew from Xie Junping and Hu Huaying's reactions that this young master had an extraordinary status. She faintly furrowed her brows, but she didn't raise her head. She just shrunk back a bit. He Donglu chuckled as he sat down. He was just about to strike up a conversation when he heard a low chuckle from the side. The sound was extremely pleasant, like the cry of a lark on a branch. It made one's heart itch to hear it. He Donglu followed the sound and raised his head. He saw a youthful and bright young woman. She laughed in an unbridled and willful manner, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. She didn't conceal them at all, practically lighting up the dusky corner. Oh my, this is good. He Donglu was at the age where he loved to play. He liked this kind of magnanimous playmaster the most. He immediately changed his target. His gaze swept over the other person's body, and he called out with a laugh, "Beautiful lady, you're dressed as a female student being kept as a mistress." Zhang Yingying had been stifled by the previous round of silence. It was hard for her to speak even if she wanted to. Naturally, she was incomparably cooperative when she saw that there was something fun to be had. She beamed as she hugged Luo Nan's arm and shook it. "This is our boss." Chapter 323. Beauty, please don't enter the entertainment circle. Your acting skills are too exaggerated, okay? He Donglu blinked his eyes a few times before adjusting himself. He took advantage of the situation to turn his line of sight. He wanted to see who the boss was. Luo Nan was pondering over a difficult problem, but He Donglu and Zhang Yingying had joined forces to cause a ruckus. His train of thought was completely severed. He frowned and raised his head. Under the illumination of the deep blue light, he just happened to meet He Donglu face to face. "Oh, haven't we met before?" He Donglu had a bit of an impression, but Luo Nan had taken off his white coat and was even wearing his glasses. There were too many distracting factors, so he didn't recognize Luo Nan for a time. Xie Junping smiled as he introduced, "Oh, it's Nanster. We just met here." He Donglu had seen many people tonight, so how could he remember so much? However, he shot a glance at the large man standing behind Xie Junping, and a light bulb went off in his head. He remembered this group. The one that left the deepest impression was actually Shuelei, the martial artist. He had nearly gotten into a conflict with his other follower. As for Luo Nan, who was playing the role of a psychologist, He Donglu could only barely say that he had some impression of him. "Oh, I've seen him before. What's up? You changed your role. Do you think that being a boss is more promising?" Luo Nan glanced at him, but he didn't respond. He Donglu didn't mind. He didn't give Luo Nan any space to speak, so he directly gave his evaluation. "This move is quite creative. Most importantly, it's interesting. It's just that you're wearing it. It's a bit lacking in professionalism. Especially the glasses. What a failure. Bro, your face is tender to begin with. Now that you're wearing this featureless prop, you look like a student even through the crystal pillar." Zhang Yingying followed up, "You're a big boss. There's nothing wrong with being a bit casual. It's good to be surrounded by followers. You see, secretaries, lovers, followers, bodyguards, a whole bunch of them. She drew a circle with her slender fingers. Behind her, Shuelei was tall and strong, and looked like a bodyguard. He also had a corresponding sense of duty. However, most of the followers sitting on the sofa could only roll their eyes. Of course, He Donglu knew that this was a joke. He laughed out loud and habitually raised his arms, resting them on the shoulders of the two pretty faces. After all, there were too many people here. When he stretched, it was a little tight. His originally well-ironed military uniform was lifted halfway by his movements. Right Vase very considerately reached out and tried to smooth it. Later, she felt that it was not easy to do so, so she simply helped him unbutton his shirt and revealed the shirt underneath. Amidst the laughter, she pretended to lose her balance and rolled directly into his arms. She even pretended to struggle, but in fact, she was rubbing against him and teasing him. On the other side, Vase left pouted. She had been outshone by her comrade and competitor. He Donglu did not bat an eyelid. From what he saw, the right pretty face's method of courting favor was a bit low. It was mixed with feelings of jealousy towards that female student. His thoughts were impure. Originally, a friend with benefits for a short period of time wouldn't be able to ask for too much. However, there was a first-class prey in front of him. If he continued to accept this, wouldn't it make him seem too low-class? Therefore, He Donglu paid no attention to the plump and tender flesh rolling around his waist. His gaze swiveled, skipping over all the men. He only looked at the women. Soon, he discovered that Luo Nan's secretary on the other side seemed to be pretty good. The lighting in the corner of the sofa was dim, and the left pretty face was separated by the angle. He Donglu wasn't able to see clearly for a time. He only knew that the woman was dressed in a white collar outfit. She sat on the sofa, and her thin suit pants faintly outlined the lines of her legs. Her legs were slender and powerful, and the feeling was quite right. There was also the quiet lover at the edge of the sofa. He could see her even more clearly now that she was unobstructed. Don't look at her submissive appearance. She had a different flavor. Oh, she looked a bit familiar. TSK. Secretary, lover, and kept woman. They were all first-class characters. He Donglu could not help but feel jealous. He had always been a bit emotional. He suddenly didn't want to pay attention to Luo Nan. Instead, he took advantage of the gap made by the right pretty face to chat and laugh with the lover at the edge of the sofa. Beauty, I think we've met before. Tianxi gave him a glance and nodded slightly. She didn't say anything. This was a rather polite refusal. However, how could He Donglu be sent away so easily? Since he had spoken, he had a follow-up move. He pressed down on the right pretty face with one hand, not letting the stupid woman get up and block his line of sight. He continued to strike up a conversation. Let me think. Right. You came with Tang Yi, right? Uh-huh. You left a deep impression. Tianxi was startled, and her expression changed slightly. He Donglu had already achieved his goal. He even moved his body closer to Tianxi. He deliberately lowered his voice. You just happened to separate from Tang Yi when I saw you just now. What a pity. I didn't even get to know you. May I ask for your name? His extremely oppressive movements forced Tianxi to shrink back a bit. But then this beautiful woman's reaction made He Donglu depressed. Tianxi's gaze went over his shoulder and cast toward Luo Nan. Clearly, her instincts still cared more about Luo Nan's opinion. Was this really just role-playing and nothing more? Oh, and also, isn't this ring-shaped sofa a bit too quiet? Just as this thought arose, Luo Nan began another conversation. Is there any way to get a large loan? Zhang Yingying responded. How much do you want to borrow? 60 million. Wow. Look at how determined you are to get it. It's true that I'm determined to get it. Luo Nan's elbows were still resting on his knees. His hands were clasped together, blocking his mouth for a bit of support. His head faced the crystal pillar in the center, staring at the mutant devil ray that was still spiraling and swimming inside. He Donglu. Why did it feel like he was transparent air? Not a single word in the short conversation was related to him. Even though he had brought 2 flower vases and forcefully entered, even though he had brought out the topic of role-playing, and he had even taken liberties with his lover. The sofa corner circle had not given a serious response. They had even ignored him. Please. No matter when or where young master went, he was always the center of attention. He was the center of the stage. When had he ever encountered this sort of treatment? Was it on purpose? Dongluo's gaze turned cold. He looked at the more familiar Xie Junping and Hu Huaying, but he discovered that the body language of these two seemed to be quite awkward. It was quite different from the cold and quiet feelings of the other people. Something's wrong. He had always felt that Luo Nan was a friend or follower of Xie Junping and Hu Huaying. Naturally, the group of people in the sofa corner were of the same type. It was only natural that they should be a gathering of rich second generations. But now it seemed that this way of thinking was unreliable. He was familiar with the younger generation of the military and government figures of Xia City. He was a bit unfamiliar with the business world, but he still had some concept of it. Yao Feng had also introduced Xie Junping and Hu Huaying to him before. Behind them was an extremely representative regional financial group of Xia City. They had been operating for several decades, and their industries covered every corner of the city. They were absolutely not something that could be summarized in the medical group, ranches, and the like. Xie Junping and Hu Huaying, especially Xie Junping, should be core figures in any circle of rich second generations in the business world. But their current seating, their tone, and their demeanor were all eccentric and out of sync. There was also the youthful and bright female student. She said things like boss, follower, lover, bodyguard, and so on. Though she was mostly teasing and joking, the group of people sitting on the sofa actually didn't jeer or retort, regardless of whether they were happy or not. There was a faint sense of closeness within them. It could even be said that they had a superior and subordinate relationship. This was a model that the loose circle of rich second generations could never achieve. Donglu was a big silk pants, yes, but he had been in a military and government family for a long time. His brain had never been lacking. Once he discovered a problem, his gaze swept over everyone's faces once more. This time, the objects of his observation weren't limited to beautiful women. He finally discovered that aside from the ones he paid attention to, the remaining few were all relatively old. They didn't have the slightest bit of scholarly air. They shouldn't belong in the category of participating in the party. He observed others, and others also looked at him. The emotions in their gazes were subtle. What's the meaning of this oldest guy staring at me like that? He looks quite familiar. Old Joe? Fuck. Dongluo's scalp suddenly tingled. His gaze drifted, and he instinctively avoided the gaze that was brimming with deep meaning. Then his drifting gaze finally caught a glimpse of his own bodyguard, the old driver. He didn't even take a seat. His gaze was looking straight ahead, and he stood ramrod straight. He was perhaps even more serious than he was back in the army. At this time, Yao Feng made a phone call. Xie Junping contacted him, and the other side immediately asked, "Have you seen young Master He?" They just happened to be together. It's Yao Seer. Xie Junping made a slight gesture towards Donglu. Seeing that the latter didn't respond at all, he reported the location. He's at the corner of the sofa in the bar. Don't. Donglu suddenly spoke. He suddenly stood up, giving Xie Junping a fright. He only saw Donglu chuckle and reply, "There's no need for him to come. I just happened to have some business with him. See you guys later." Xie Junping looked over, stunned. Hu Huaying's expression was more or less the same. As for the two flower vases at Dongluo's side, they were even more dizzy. They stood up at a loss of what to do, completely unaware of what was going on. It was good to stand up, especially the flower vase on the left. Her posture was perfect. She helped him block the other side's line of sight. Donglu only considered himself to be a role model of the new era, deceiving one's ears while stealing a bell. He didn't say anything else and headed outside the ring-shaped sofa. Tianxi subconsciously moved to the side to make way, but at this time, a swift and fierce tall and sturdy figure arrived. He raised his voice and laughed. "Oh my, so many people. Are there any seats left?" Cragburst had arrived. Before his laughter faded, Wayne coldly said, "Stand." "Huh." Cragburst stared blankly for a moment. He then saw a certain young man in a military uniform in the aisle of the ring-shaped sofa. His clothes were untidy, and he was about to take a step and jump out. He immediately came to a realization. He had always been a man of action. His large hand, the size of a cattail leaf fan, stretched out and pressed down on the young man's head, directly pushing him back. Kragburst's thick and long fingers pinched Hidonglu's head like a ball. His palm blocked Hidonglu's mouth and nose, stifling Hidonglu to the point where his eyes rolled back. Since birth, when had he ever been treated like this? Even if it was only for an instant, it was enough for him to remember it for a lifetime. Especially Xie Junping and Hu Huaying's stupefied appearance. It fully displayed the effects of this absurd play. He had finally been placed in the center of the stage, but he was playing the role of a freaking clown. An utterly terrible mood rushed to his head. Hidonglu's face flushed red. Kragburst's palm had just moved away when Hidonglu stomped his feet and shouted, "He Yuan, is this how you treat your little brother?" The sofa corner suddenly turned silent. Truly, many people needed to adjust the way they stabilized their facial muscles. But soon, Zhang Yingying used a loud whistle and laughter to announce the failure of the adjustment. "Wow, Secretary He, you two siblings really complement each other." Cough cough cough. Papercut also broke down. He laughed and coughed. He even had to raise his hand to express his apology to He Yuan. He Yuan didn't care. Hidonglu didn't care about hunting targets and the like. He glared angrily at Zhang Yingying and the crowd of onlookers who were watching the show. Countless vicious thoughts flipped through his mind. But soon He Yuan issued a new order. "Take it off." These words came out of nowhere, but Hidonglu understood in an instant. His face flushed even redder. He shouted, "Sis, leave me some face. This isn't a real military uniform. It's cosplay. A prop." He Yuan didn't say anything. She merely raised her head from the thick shadows and cast her clear and cold gaze. The left pretty face had long since been stupefied by this scene. Her legs went soft, and she fell back onto the sofa. There was no longer any barrier between the siblings. Everything was clear and distinct. Hidonglu was afraid of this, not to mention that he was from a military family. His methods were indeed taboo. In the end, he could only grit his teeth and take off his military uniform. He conveniently stuffed it into the right pretty face's bosom. He waved his hand irritably, like he was shooing away chickens and ducks. He told the two pretty faces to scram. "All of you go. All of you go. Hurry up." The two pretty faces left with stupefied expressions. Hidonglu only wore a white shirt on his upper body. Even though the temperature in the building was adjusted quite well, he still shivered under the psychological effects. He spread his hands toward He Yuan in extreme helplessness. "This should be fine, right?" He Yuan ignored him. She tilted her head slightly and asked Luo Nan in a soft voice, "Mr. Luo, are we going to the hospital now?" Luo Nan knew that this place was no longer suitable. He nodded and stood up. Everyone moved with him the moment he moved. The members of the society stood up in unison. People like Xie Junping and Tianxi, who had no concept of what was going on, stood up subconsciously. The group of people walked out in a dense mass. Hey, what the hell are you guys doing?" Hidonglu suddenly became an invisible person. His urgent greetings were ignored. He was truly indignant. He couldn't help but reach out to grab his sister, but he didn't have the strength to do so. How could he grab her? He forced himself to keep up, but He Yuan's cold and clear gaze streaked across him. He immediately raised his hand and stood motionless in his original spot. He stared blankly as the group of people left into the distance. "Hey, young master you're..." Yao Feng rushed over from behind. He saw Hidonglu wearing a white shirt. He raised his hand as if he had just been robbed. The dense mass of people in front of him had already merged into the stream of people. He couldn't see them clearly. Yao Feng just felt that this was inexplicable. He called out, "Young master you can see me?" "Ah, he." Hidonglu no longer paid attention to Yao Feng. He just lowered his hand and sat back down on the sofa. Since He Yuan was here, he had already more or less guessed the group's background. Everyone in the family knew where He Yuan's focus of work was during this period of time. A group of arrogant soldiers and valiant generals. Criminals outside the law. Hidonglu was still gnashing his teeth a bit, but he was confused in the blink of an eye. Secretary? What the hell? Donglu tried to recall Luo Nan's face, but he was affected by his glasses and the dim lighting. He was unable to remember Luo Nan's face clearly. His mind spun a few times, and his impression became even more blurry. He leaned back, nearly giving up. But an exceptionally clear picture inexplicably flipped over in his mind. In the dusky region, the ripples of light were faintly discernible. Luo Nan and He Yuan sat side by side. One was stooped, the other upright. And wasn't the distance a bit too close? Chapter 324. October 28, 2096. 4:55 in the morning. Luo Nan's consciousness floated up from the chaos. It was neither close nor distant. He hadn't opened his eyes yet, but the hexa-ear had already projected a portion of useful information into his mind. It represented the beginning of a new day. Sunday's class schedule was updated and adjusted. Outings were arranged. Gear's repair progress was made. Grandfather's condition was briefed. The latest battle situation regarding the logic world was on the internal forum. The series of information that had already been sorted out lit up on the hexa-ear's interface. Luo Nan's mind swept over, and he received the information one by one. But he didn't read it in detail. He just stretched lazily on the bed and adjusted his posture a bit. He laid perfectly straight and relaxed his body. Right now he was lying on the bed with his hands crossed behind his head. As his body turned, the back of his head rubbed against his palms, making rustling noises. The warmth of his palms passed through a thin layer of hair and rotated on his scalp. But no matter what, it was unable to seep down. Instead, there was a slight coolness that seeped out from the inner layer of his scalp. This feeling was very wonderful. The interior of his brain cavity was empty. It was as if his brain tissue had melted away, leaving behind only the eye's orifice that was gradually becoming complete. The external neuron that revolved and twisted. It was neither close nor distant. It seemed to be separated by an invisible curtain. It was no longer like 2 days ago when sparks of electricity were crackling everywhere. But upon careful contemplation, there was a wisp of cold air passing through. In a trance, that area seemed to have sunk in. It was impossible to see the bottom. It led directly to another indescribable dimension. Right now, a cold wind blew from within, filling his entire skull with a chill. It was as if his forehead had caved in with a hole. Luo Nan grimaced with his eyes closed. His consciousness was a bit erratic. That cold and gloomy stream of air was like a long thread, pulling in enormous waves of grayish-white clouds. It churned and rushed into the depths of his brain. It opened up his mind, which was originally restrained in one place, to accommodate the unfathomable vast world of reality and illusion. He slowly opened his eyes. The room was dark. Only the residual light of the street lamps in the neighborhood passed through the window screen, giving the room a bit of brightness. It faintly outlined the outlines of various furnishings. Luo Nan's current level of cultivation in the eye's orifice gave him the ability to see in the night. His gaze could see the fine details, but his line of sight was unfocused. He didn't pay attention to the structure of the ceiling. He was in a daze for a while. Then his gaze finally focused. He exerted strength in his waist and abdomen, and sat up. This was her uncle's house, his bedroom. The space wasn't very spacious, but the bed was. Luo Nan put up with it, assuming a posture that tested his flexibility on the bed. It was like yoga, but it wasn't yoga. It wasn't guidance, but it was loosening his muscles and bones, training his body. His entire body was like a deformed meatball. He tossed and turned from one end of the bed to the other. There were only two things that did not change during the process. One was the state of breathing in and out, where the breath was continuous, and the other was the electric fire generated by the coupling between the eye's orifice and the external neuron. It crackled and flickered, shining in the brain, then down to the lungs, and even the tips of the hands and feet. The vibration opened up all the pores in the body, and sometimes there was severe pain, but the perception became more and more acute. This morning exercise class lasted for 40 minutes. Although it was all bed exercises, most of the exercises involved touching the bones, flesh, and tendons. It was quite comprehensive. Not to mention, There was also the coupling force of the two sets of gears within the framework of order that affected the entire body. It was both a tempering and a torture. The feeling was definitely not one of enjoyment. By the time Luonan got off the bed, his body was already damp. The bedding and the like were naturally cleaned up by the housekeeping robots. Luonan only went to the bathroom to take a shower. He looked into the mirror, which was mostly obscured by steam. He saw his body, which was still thin, and his eyes, which were densely covered in cracks. The cracks in his pupils seemed to have shrunk a bit compared to 2 days ago. He still looked quite horrifying, and there were occasional flows of electricity. There was nothing to say. He had to cover it up. Luonan picked up the mirror case by his hand and put the contact lenses in his eyes. He couldn't use the other functions of this toy, but the effects of the contact lenses were first class. Luonan waited until everything was ready. He was dressed neatly, and he recovered his appearance as a young student. He went downstairs and went out to begin his routine morning run. He had just run out of the house when the sound of whistling entered his ears. It was transmitted through the hexa ear, followed by a temporary tactical position. Luonan went through the information in his mind. He quickly turned his head and saw a tall figure 50 meters away in the darkness of the night. The figure was reaching out with his fingers, aiming at Luonan's head. Bang. You're still a bit slow. Kragburst grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Are you sure you want to compete in sniping? Luonan laughed as well. He communicated with Kragburst through the hexa ear and ran over to meet up. Kragburst was dressed like a morning jogger. The two jogged side by side. Aside from the large difference in height, they were no different from other people who were training together. Kragburst's appearance outside Luonan's residence was naturally not a coincidence. According to the schedule, it was time for Kragburst to teach crash course in universal commands. And everyone understood that this was one of the protective measures for Luonan. The purpose of teaching was to ensure that there was always an ability user by his side. When an unexpected event occurred, the ability user could protect him, cooperate with him in battle, and so on. Perhaps Yuan already had such thoughts and arrangements when she created the training program. The actions of those people from headquarters only pushed this arrangement from hidden to obvious. Luonan was non-committal toward this arrangement. Compared to himself, he was more concerned about the safety of his grandfather, his uncle, and his aunt. The society had made arrangements for this, but the results had yet to be tested. Luonan wished that he would never test this for the rest of his life. I saw a post this morning. The big debate is getting more and more explosive. Most people are just messing around, but some people are quite interesting. Don't you have an anonymous post? Kragburst and Luonan were friends who had fought side by side. They were quite familiar with each other. They were quite different from the other teachers. Before the lecture, he chatted idly with Luonan about the heated debate in the logic world over the past 2 days. Luonan thought of the information he received in the morning and shrugged. Isn't it all a strategy? I think the results are quite good. Half a month had passed since that night at Frost River Reality. The discussion regarding President Ouyang Chen's logic world on the society's internal forums had truly become popular. It looked slow, but it could be seen that the lover's heart was clear. It was all hype. The general logic was like this. Hey, have you heard of President Ouyang's logic world? A spatial fault that forms a world of its own. That's awesome. It really is awesome. But this toy is too high and mighty. I can't understand it. Haven't you seen the forums? A bunch of people are interpreting it. They're all so clear and logical. It's like they're all extraordinaries. But Old Yu replied. Old Yu? Yeah. It seems that he agrees with the OP's words. But that OP only heard about it from someone else. It's just a casual remark. It's a bit roundabout. Her Majesty Empress Wu doesn't quite agree. My. This person replied too? A fleeting moment. Those two haven't opened their mouths yet, but the people below are making a ruckus. They haven't stopped yet. They're all clamoring for President Ouyang to personally explain. TSK. Let's go take a look. Just like this, it was like a crosstalk. It was too fake, but it couldn't withstand the effects of Old Yu and Her Majesty Empress Wu's authority. There was also the anticipation of Ouyang personally teaching and explaining. In a short dozen hours, related posts flooded the screen. They were full of words like support Old Yu, long live Empress Wu, pay respects to Old Yu, Her Majesty Empress Wu is the best, and so on. Of course, a bunch of bored people wouldn't let go of Ouyang, the instigator. They posted messages like they were celebrating. President Ouyang has come out to receive guests. He's already outside the laboratory. Who has the guts to knock on the door? Seeing is believing. Hearing is false. Bragging will get you struck. I strongly request to set off fireworks again. No, I mean the logic world. 70 to 80% of the people who left such messages were from the Xia City branch. After Her Majesty Empress Wu had successfully entered the ranks of extraordinaries, Xia City's Iron Triangle had become even more illustrious. All the branch members were honored. So, instead of calling it a debate, it was better to call it a show of closeness. It actually increased the Xia City branch's cohesive force. In the eyes of some people, the posts had a different meaning. It seemed that the Xia City branch no longer wanted to hide the truth of the Frost River reality incident. Did they want to announce it to the world? Otherwise, why would they mention the logic world? So soon, the other cities that had set up the psychic wave network joined in. Most of the people who followed were high-end people. They wouldn't worship the Iron Triangle, and they were disinclined to leave a message in the post that had gone off topic early on. But they would swipe a few times from time to time. They wanted to see if Ouyang would say something later on. They wanted to see if he would reveal any useful information. And this was the effect of the hype. The attention of those people would be pulled to the side of the Iron Triangle. They wouldn't talk about Luonen all the time. These were the three big shots of the Xia City branch. They were diverting the pressure from Luonan. It could be considered a patch for the sudden incident from 2 days ago. Luonan calmly accepted this because this was what he deserved. But then again, whether this diverting method would be effective was still uncertain. It was impossible for Luonan to place all his hopes on this. He just paid a bit of attention, that's all. Moreover, there were tens of thousands of stories. There were many long-winded discussions, confusing people, and stirring up the atmosphere. They were all mixed together. Luonan felt dizzy just looking at them. It was better to keep a respectful distance. However, Luonan was also curious about Cragburst's attitude. Don't you hate this kind of pure-mouth cannon the most? Can you keep looking? Why can't I keep looking? It's very pleasing to the eye. Cragburst gave a thumbs up. Her Majesty Empress Wu is really cool this time. She took all kinds of private photos. She's so beautiful. And then there's that group of girls from her firm. They're lining up to take photos together. This is a once-in-a-decade opportunity. Hurry up and save them. Remember not to save them on the Psychic Wave Network. Otherwise, if Her Majesty is in a bad mood, all the collections will be finished. Fine. Luonan now understood why the popularity of the post had exploded. But then again, Her Majesty Empress Wu was a legendary woman. Luonan had long heard of her name, but he never had the chance to meet her. He was very curious as to what kind of person she was. She was able to tame Zhang Yingying, who had a temperament like hers. Luonan's thought was born, and he wanted to observe. He never expected that Cragburst would scream as soon as he opened the page from the Hexa-ear. Fuck! My cloud drive. Chapter 325. Luonan was running in front, breathing smoothly. Cragburst was tearing apart a certain scoundrel who had taught him how to transfer. The two were connected through the Hexa-ear, but Cragburst howled in his excitement. You said transferring is the only way to be safe. What's going on now? Virus? Is the Martial Empress so bored that she planted a virus in her balls? Oh right, she doesn't have any balls. The latter half of his voice was very low, but it soon rose up again. You don't know? I listened to your fucking introduction, and used your transcoder to transfer the files. Ha. Of course it's yours. Why would I use it for anything else? F***ck. You're wailing. Cragburst grinned as he spoke, reversing his mood. Oh my. I heard about your super high capacity archive. It turned to ashes just like that? That's quite a pity. Cragburst ended the communication with a big laugh. He felt that he finally had someone to take with him. Even though the person was a bit thinner. He impatiently explained to Luo Nan. It's that bastard bamboo pole. He's really hurt himself this time. He reaped what he sowed. Luo Nan didn't have that kind of agitated experience. He wasn't a veteran like Cragburst or Bamboo Pole. He just followed along and asked, isn't it troublesome to transfer from the psychic wave network to the internet? I heard so. But it's fine as long as we know how to use the tools. Bamboo Pole wrote a few small programs that are quite easy to use. Of course he's screwed this time. Is it a simple information transfer? Or is it an interference and coupling between the mental and material planes? Don't. Let's not talk about this. You can just ask Bamboo Pole later. Cragburst immediately called for a stop. He wasn't interested in pure theory at all, especially with Luo Nan's fierce reputation. If Luo Nan really got up early in the morning, it was as if he had drunk 3 liters of alcohol. His day would be wasted. Cragburst admitted defeat, but Luo Nan was a bit regretful. Right now he was very interested in all phenomena and theories that could involve format conversion, interference coupling, and so on. His breakthrough 2 days ago had opened a door to him. The door was full of treasures, but there were far too many treasures. He hadn't completely sorted them out yet. He needed to continue working hard. Luo Nan's morning running exercise had just begun. He thought for a bit and changed the topic. I still haven't thanked you. Cragburst waved his hand. How could that be? This sort of mission is easy and convenient, and you get points too. Only your secretary would be so considerate in arranging it. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the analysis of winning and losing factors, and the mentality of facing the enemy. What you told me was really useful and helped me a lot. Let's talk about some experience. If we can use it, it means that we have a tacit understanding. Cragburst rubbed his big bald head. He was quite proud of himself. He gave Luo Nan another thumbs up. You were able to find a concept that suits you so quickly. You're quite amazing. Oh right, I heard from Zhang Yingying that it's called coupling? To be precise, it's formatting theory. Coupling is a type of application. It turns theory into reality. Luo Nan knew that Cragburst didn't want to listen to theory, so he didn't say too much. According to Cragburst's suggestion, one must have an unshakable conviction when facing a powerful enemy. That conviction must be established upon one's most irreplaceable advantage. Luo Nan didn't hesitate too much. He chose formatting theory. Only a complete set of laws and rules established upon the foundation of formatting theory could be an irreplaceable element fused into his bloodline. It was formatting theory that brought him inconceivable experiences. It presented the marvels of the dark side of the world to him. It allowed him to know what others didn't know. It allowed him to see what others didn't see. It also gave him the authority of certain laws and rules. And what was even more fortunate was that he was able to comprehend his mother's coupling theory in time. He borrowed the heart lantern of the eye's orifice that Xiaoshenyu had taught him to put the capital of formatting theory into practice. He could completely use a lofty tone to speak to an ability user like Black Beetle like that. You can't see what I can see. You don't know what I know. You can't compare to what I can control. You can't reach where I'm at. Frankly speaking, this feeling wasn't bad. Luo Nan grinned and laughed. The temperature flowing through his veins seemed to increase somewhat. On the other side, Cragburst pondered for a bit. He grunted twice and then opened his mouth to speak. It's obviously good to be able to find a conviction. However, it's not enough to just look at victory. You have to look at defeat. There's no one in this world who can win forever and never lose. It's said that President Ouyang was beaten to the point of questioning life when he was young. When that time comes, it will be time for you to be tested. Luo Nan turned his head to glance at him and nodded. I'm prepared. A bit of mental preparation is absolutely not enough. Cragburst gave a piece of advice as someone with experience. It's hard for even the calmest person to thoroughly discover their own flaws during victory. But after a crushing defeat, mistakes will be magnified. It's far too hard to maintain a normal state of mind. Therefore, it needs to be tough. It needs to be quenched and polished over and over again. In the end, the existing structure needs to be completely smashed to pieces. Only then can a good piece of steel be refined. The most taboo thing is to sway left and right. It's self-denial. I know what you mean. Luonan continued to smile. The warm breath he exhaled from his mouth and nose was as smooth and long as before. But don't worry. I have no other choice. The blow of failure had arrived a long time ago. The current situation of the 3 generations of the Luo family was the clearest manifestation of this. But since his grandfather, mother, and perhaps even his father, all of his flesh and blood had poured their blood and sweat into formatting theory, Luonan was destined to be the driver and reviser of formatting theory before it crashed, even if it appeared to be a sports car that had gone out of control at high speeds. Therefore, Luonan didn't have the powerful conviction to use formatting theory to defeat all powerful enemies. He only had the resolve to live with it and die with it. Luckily, the road ahead was still marked by coupling and the existence of gear. There was still light. There was still hope. Luonan originally wanted to say something after his smile faded, but he didn't say anything in the end. His feet didn't stop. He raised his head to look ahead. The morning light gradually revealed itself behind the flower walls of the courtyard in the residential area. Even though there were layers upon layers of high-rise buildings, the clear outline of the sky was reflected. He could see everything clearly. Luonan jogged a few laps with Crag Burst before returning home. Even though today was Sunday, everyone in the family had their own plans. They didn't wake up too late. Even Mo Peng yawned as he lay on the living room sofa, playing games to pass the time. He didn't see Luonan enter the house. His uncle, Mo Haihang, was busy in the kitchen. He would insist on cooking whenever he had the time to prevent the entire family from suffering from the torment of the AI housekeeper or his aunt. As for his aunt, Mrs. Luo Shuqing, she just laid out the tableware and occasionally directed the AI housekeeper to tidy up the house. Luonan greeted her and went upstairs to wash up. Luo Shuqing just nodded. She didn't say much. It was hard to describe the cheerfulness between her brows. She glanced at Mo Peng playing games in the next moment and spoke in a cold voice. "Come over and help." Mo Peng raised his head in shock, but he didn't dare to let out a fart when he saw his mother's face. He tossed away the handheld terminal and walked over to act like an obedient child. The atmosphere in the house was a bit oppressive. It was like this all the way until mealtime. It was no wonder that such a situation occurred. Yesterday was Saturday. The family went to the sanatorium to visit their grandfather, Luo Yuandao. But it was different from last time. They practically didn't have the chance to have direct contact with Luo Yuandao. According to the sanatorium, the degenerative symptoms of the old man's central nervous system were becoming more and more severe. It further deepened the condition of his schizophrenia, causing his mood to be very unstable. Moreover, it was still worsening. If this continued, his mind and body would probably quickly collapse. There would be no possibility of saving him. Even though this was a result that could be predicted long ago, it was still hard for people to accept when it actually happened. Luo Shuqing was the only relative who was allowed to visit for a short period of time yesterday. Her mood entered an extremely downcast state after she personally witnessed her father's various conditions. Her mood didn't improve by much after a night. Because of this, the dining table was strangely silent during breakfast time. Luonan buried his head in eating. Thin slices of beef were paired with millet porridge. A dozen or so slices of meat were directly pressed into the bowl of porridge. The porridge was thick and scalding, and it was wrapped in the fragrance of meat. It went very well with the rice. He used the largest bowl in the family. His progress was also the fastest. It didn't even take 10 minutes for him to finish his third bowl. Don't drink hot food. It's hot and you'll get sick. Luo Shuqing only ate a shallow layer of porridge in her bowl. She didn't have any appetite. She just watched the others eat. In the end, she stared at Luonan and opened her mouth to admonish him. Luonan just grunted and continued to bury his head. He slurped the golden millet porridge into his mouth, eating boldly and confidently. His appetite had always been astonishing. After following Gym Master Xiao to cultivate in the eye's orifice, his appetite had increased. Luo Nen wasn't indifferent to his grandfather's worsening condition. However, the experiences of the past few days, especially when he was swaying back and forth on the edge of life and death, caused a different feeling to linger in his heart. There were actually many attitudes one could have when facing the pain of one's loved ones. Sorrow was a common and helpless action in the secular world, but it might not be suitable for him. Luo Shuqing didn't get angry when she saw her nephew bury his head and eat. She just asked her husband, "Did Nanan gain some weight?" Mo Haiheng could guess that his wife had sensed that something was wrong with her mood. She was trying to adjust herself, so he grunted and said, "Old Mo, give me a number. What's Luo Nan's weight?" Old Mo was the AI housekeeper. He grasped the body data and health index of the entire family. He immediately responded with a magnetic baritone voice. Mr. Luo Nan's weight was measured at 52.6 kilograms on October 28th. His BMI is 18.8. That's fine. Mo Haiheng nodded at Luo Nan. You've put on a bit more weight recently. Your complexion looks better, though it's still on the light side. Luo Shuqing felt a bit gratified. Her lips curved into a smile. It looks like practicing martial arts was the right choice to stay in the hospital for a long time. I'll let the chubby kid go later. Mo Peng had been shot while eating. He immediately opened his eyes wide with an innocent expression. Luo Nan swallowed the piece of meat in his mouth and helped him out of this predicament. Gym Master Xiao is about to move. The dojo will be temporarily closed for business. Luo Shuqing furrowed her brows. Then what are you going to do? I don't go much. I just need to give some pointers occasionally. They only accepted me because of Leicester. This can't happen again. 2 days ago, Xie Junping wanted to join in on the fun, but he was rejected. Luo Nen didn't speak a single word of falsehood. At most, it was a bit exaggerated. Luo Shuqing stared at Mo Peng with a face full of disdain. You found a dozen excuses when I asked you to spar with me. Now you don't have a chance. Look at that belly of yours. The Mo family and the Luo family don't have anyone with a body like yours. Mo Peng was suddenly questioned about the purity of his bloodline. He was drunk. He couldn't help retorting, I'm still in my puberty period, okay? How am I supposed to grow taller if I'm skinny? Let's not talk about anything else. If I'm shorter than Emoya in the future, am I supposed to blame you guys for being biased? Emoya. Luo Shuqing suddenly laughed. You're talking about that unfilial girl who ran away from home? You don't need to worry. I'll break her legs when she gets back. Chapter 326. Madame Luo Shuqing unleashed her feudal aura when talking about Emoya. She was decisive and decisive. As the head of the family, Mo Haiheng coughed, Don't go overboard. Luo Shuqing tilted her head and stared at her husband. Overboard? Her little brother has been hospitalized several times, and her grandfather's condition has worsened. She's been away from home for nearly a month, and she hasn't called once a week. Her entire mind is on that band. Who's the one overboard? Luo Nan and Mo Ping glanced at each other. They buried their heads in their food. Of course, they couldn't tell their aunt, or mother, that Emoya had rushed back to see Luo Nan the second time he was admitted to the hospital. She just hid it from a certain someone. Yes, Mo Haiheng knew about it. He even covered for her. But right now he still had a calm expression. It was quite admirable. Mo Peng saw that his father was acting beautifully, and his brain heated up. He blurted, She'll be back in a week. You can teach her a lesson when the time comes. Who's wrong? Is there anyone who curses their sister like that? Luo Shuqing shot him a cold glance. She seemed to be shifting her anger. Mo Peng stepped on a landmine. He buried his head back down with a face of grief and indignation. Luo Nan had been burying his head in his food the entire time, but he was distracted by the topic of Emoya. Luo Shuqing was worried. He was worried as well. But they were worried in different directions. They were in troubled times. Even with the support of the Xia City branch, it was hard to take care of the entire family. Not to mention that Emoya was hundreds of kilometers away in a border town. In terms of worry, he was even more worried than his aunt. Nan Nan, what are your plans for today? Luo Xuqing wanted to ease the atmosphere. She no longer clung to her son, and turned to ask Luo Nan, bringing him back to reality. Luo Nan answered honestly, I need to go to the maintenance center in the West City. I accidentally broke one of Gym Master Xiu's things a few days ago at the Daoguan. I need to go get it fixed. Luo Xuqing was a bit surprised. West City? That's quite far. Should I take you there? No need. I've already booked a car. It'll be there after dinner. Luo Nan quickly finished eating. He tidied up a bit and ran out. The car he booked was Kragburst's military off-road vehicle. It was parked outside the residential area and had been waiting for a long time. Kragburst's original off-road vehicle had already been destroyed on the recycling stratum. This was a newly purchased one, and it looked even more domineering. Luo Nan sat in the front passenger seat and adjusted his posture. The car was a military-style car, so the seat was a bit hard, but it was truly spacious. With his height, he could practically stretch his legs in the seat. TSK, how much is this car? About 2 million. Kragburst started up the car and ran over the road like a tank. Not long after, he cut into the high-speed magnetic track and continued to accelerate. Luo Nan used to be the least concerned about this sort of thing, but right now he was very envious. Tycoon, are all ability users easy to earn money? Why can't I find a way? Kragburst laughed. You're still thinking about 60 million? Didn't the secretary say she would help you find one? I can't always trouble her. Luo Nan's two palms fiercely pressed against his temples. He propped up his elbows, half stretching, half venting. He had hardly ever worried about money before. After all, he was the only son of the Luo family. His parents had invested in his education and living funds when he was born. He had a fixed amount of credits to spend every month. Add the doting of his aunt and uncle, and Moya's financial support, and he was barely able to support himself even when he was conducting pharmaceutical research. But if he wanted to purchase the mutant devil ray and the crystal pillar of Ocean Sky Cloud City, the large sum of 60 million far exceeded his level of living. If he was still that stuffy research student and followed the prescribed routine, it wouldn't be easy for him to earn this much money in his lifetime. And now, he heard that the Yao family couldn't stand the destruction the devil ray was causing to the ecosystem within the crystal pillar. They were constantly contacting the next family. Perhaps the price would drop if he dragged it out for a bit longer, but it wouldn't mean much to Luo Nan. The most important thing was that he didn't have enough time. Oh my, I get annoyed just thinking about money. Luo Nan sighed. He only had this sort of opportunity to vent his frustrations in front of someone he was familiar with like Kragburst. Kragburst curled his lips. Your appetite is too big. Money doesn't just fall from the sky. If you really can't do it, I'll sponsor you a few million later. I'll make up for the difference or something. We're in a society of credit. Who would have so much spare money? Luo Nan leaned against the back of his seat. He cupped his hands weakly. Thanks. But I'd rather you introduce me to a way to make money. I have no clue at all. Where did you find it before? Renbufa of the society. I've looked for both official and private matters. It's all points and resources. I've never seen cash. There are points to exchange, but the market price of one honor point is 1 million. It's like trying to put out a cart of firewood with a cup of water. Zhang Yingying, paper cut, and the others all urged me not to trade. Of course you can't trade. Kragburst slapped the steering wheel. The society's pricing hasn't changed in 30 years. You know, it's purely used to scam people. If you want to trade, you should go to the black market. Pooh. Don't go to the black market either. There are countless scammers there. Many of them are set up by the bastards of headquarters to specifically sweep points. Luo Nan grunted. They said the same thing. Honor points are very important. Right now the society's circle has formed a very closed-off rare and precious resource trading platform. It's either barter or use honor points as money. Nothing else matters. Kragburst was still worried that Luo Nan didn't know the depth of things, and that he would run headfirst into it and be countered by others. Kragburst put in more effort to explain. In my opinion, This is the biggest reason why the society is able to last until today. Look at how the society has caused the heavens to be angry, and the people to be resentful. Especially headquarters. But the majority of people are still here. There are still large groups of people who are sharpening their brains to get in. Why? Isn't it because of this resource trading platform? It's whetting everyone's appetite. You can't see it right now, but when you go deeper into cultivation, you'll need maintenance, treatment, and advancement. Large amounts of points will be casually thrown out. One mistake and your progress will stagnate for several years. Luonan nodded, then shook his head. He laughed bitterly. Right now I just want to make money. Make a lot of money. Cragburst grinned. So you're looking in the wrong direction. The society's trading platform has already formed a closed-off circle. The money of the secular society isn't worth a fart. If you really want to make money, and you want to rely on your extraordinary abilities to make money, then you need to find those circles that are neither close nor distant from us. Neither close nor distant? In other words, those who know of the existence of the inner world, but don't possess the relevant abilities themselves. They hope to hire ability users to do a few special things. Individuals, financial groups, military and political powers, and so on. Cragburst turned his head to look at Luonan's face a few times when he spoke up to this point. He had a rare hesitation. This circle is half black and half white. Perhaps it's too early for you to make contact with it. What's too early? It's too late to make money right now. Oh, hold on. Using ability users. You mean to do some illegal things? Luonan came to a realization. Cragburst shrugged. It's half and half. It depends on luck. Then, I'll go try my luck. Fine. In any case, with your current ability, it's just a matter of time before you make contact with these people. I'll take you on a trip later. This circle is mainly concentrated in a few private clubs. Most of the transactions are done face-to-face. Only after you get familiar with them can you take up work online and negotiate prices. Cragburst gave Luonan some relevant information, but he only spoke in general terms. Luonan could only understand the specific content after he made contact with them. Today was certainly not the day. Luonan's main mission right now was to repair the central mechanical device of the Tai Chi ball. Luonan and Cragburst used an hour's drive to arrive at an electronic equipment shopping center located in the western district of the city. It was called Crossover. This Crossover Electronic City was a good place to ask Papercut for advice. There were over 10,000 stores of various sizes inside, and it was integrated with a large 24-hour repair service center. It was also the largest professional DIY exchange community in Xia City. Luonan and Cragburst arrived at around 9:30 in the morning. The electronic city was already crowded with people. Hundreds and thousands of unmanned devices crisscrossed in the dedicated tunnels above each floor. It was a bustling scene. Their destination was none other than the large 24-hour repair service center. Luonan followed the process and handed over the mechanical parts that needed to be repaired, the reservation number, and so on to the registration desk. Maintenance workers were assigned, and they followed the hovering ball to the corresponding workstation. They saw the pretty maintenance consultant and waited. The hardware facilities of the repair center were extremely excellent. Even the waiting area was arranged in an extremely comfortable and luxurious manner. There was also a surveillance video that led directly to the workstation. It could be displayed in the form of a 3D holographic projection, allowing the maintenance workers to have a panoramic view of their work progress. It was as if the maintenance workers were right next to them. However, it gave people the feeling that a considerable service fee was likely to be pasted on top of the maintenance fees. There were many eyes here, so Cragburst didn't discuss sensitive topics with Luonan. He looked at the workstation's situation in extreme boredom. He wasn't interested in the maintenance worker who wore a work mask. He swept his eyes over the electronic price list and clicked his tongue over and over. This place is recommended by Papercut? He can't be a broker here, right? For a price that could make a nouveau riche like Cragburst click his tongue. It was more or less the same for Luonan. However, he still believed in Papercut's sincerity. He just laughed and didn't respond. On the other side, the maintenance consultant poured tea for them. She spoke in a soft and gentle voice. Sirs, please be at ease. This is one of the 20 A-class workstations in the repair center. The maintenance workers, related personnel, and equipment are all top-notch in Xia City. We will certainly be able to provide the most efficient service to our customers. A beep sounded from the workstation before she even finished speaking. A message was transmitted back. The maintenance consultant received the message and was slightly stunned. She then smiled at Luo Nan, revealing her standard 8 teeth. Hello, customer. Since the situation of the product you sent for repair is a bit special, the maintenance worker will personally explain the situation. She turned to the side and made some fine adjustments, allowing the holographic projection to be clearer. However, the maintenance worker displayed on the projection wasn't as pleasing to the eye as she was. The maintenance worker had already stopped his inspection work. He lifted his mask, revealing his thin cheeks. His appearance was unremarkable, but since he was able to work as a technician on an A-class workstation, he was undoubtedly an outstanding professional. He sat behind the workstation and nodded toward Luo Nan and Cragburst. He looked quite amiable. Chapter 327. Hello, Worker Zhai. Luo Nan greeted politely, but he soon blinked his eyes. He felt that this maintenance technician was a bit familiar. Furthermore, he noticed that Worker Zhai seemed to be sizing him up as well. Worker Zhai's gaze wasn't directed at his face. Instead, it lingered on the notebook between his elbows. Their eyes met again. Worker Zhai smiled and continued. There are no relevant records of the products sent by the customer for repair. Preliminary confirmation is that it's a DIY product. Speaking of which, this student seems to like this kind of thing? Luo Nan was startled. He looked at where Worker Zhai's gaze landed, and memories from the depths of his brain were flipped to the surface. He suddenly realized why Worker Zhai's face felt so familiar. He had indeed seen it before. Last month, he had a conflict with Li Xueqing and his gang, and his flexible e-ink screen was trampled. Taking advantage of the Precision Electronics Interest Club's club activity, he wanted to repair it. It was this Worker Zhai who had disassembled the flexible e-ink screen, allowing Luo Nan to discover the external neuron. He remembered that he had behaved rather rudely in a moment of desperation. Fortunately, this Worker Zhai had a good temper and did not hold it against him. Luo Nan revealed a smile as well. Worker Zhai works here. Many thanks for the other day. What are you thanking me for? All I did was dismantle and reassemble it once, nothing else. By the way, is that board fixed? Luo Nan didn't know how to answer the question. While he was stunned, Worker Zhai changed the topic. What you brought today is also a DIY product. There's no ready-made manual to refer to, so it'll be more troublesome to repair. Currently, the number of visitors in the center hasn't reached the maximum, so I suggest you apply for a special service. It'll be much faster. Do I? In other words, it wasn't mass-produced. Luo Nan was a bit surprised, but he felt that this was reasonable. Apart from the dojos, he had never seen such a Tai Chi ball. He felt that its range of application was relatively narrow. Before he could respond, Cragburst asked the maintenance consultant at his side. This counts as an impromptu upgrade, right? What's the price? The pretty maintenance consultant explained softly. The two gentlemen have been booked by someone else on their behalf. All expenses for today will be borne by that customer. As for the exclusive service, it was mainly to move from the current open workbench to an independent studio to satisfy the need for privacy. It's still within the scope of the client's authority, so there's no need for additional expenses. Is that so? Papercut is being so generous. Let's not be unreasonable. Let's just turn. Cragburst simply overstepped his boundaries and helped Luo Nan make the decision. Luo Nan had no objections. Then let's enter the proprietary service mode. Workshop number 245. Please follow the maintenance consultant and wait. Worker Zhai, who was on the other side, performed a series of operations and waited for the reserve maintenance technician to arrive and take over his duties. Luo Nan and Cragburst followed the pretty maintenance consultant. They passed through the open hall, and arrived at a completely sealed workshop. The layout here wasn't too different from the outside. The only difference was that there were a few more facilities, but it was even more cramped. A big guy like Cragburst felt a bit suffocated. Just as he was mumbling to himself, a transmission channel suddenly opened on the operating platform. The mechanical device that Luonan had sent for repair was fixed onto a special support. It was transported over and placed in front of the center of the operating platform. This mechanical device was the core of the Taichi Dojo's Taichi ball. It was spherical in shape and about the size of a fist. The outer layer was a very thin metal mesh, and the inside was a device similar to a gyroscope. At this time, on the special support, the outer metal net was constantly expanding and shrinking, but that was all. Cragburst clicked his tongue twice. Isn't it troublesome to send it back and forth? As he spoke, he pulled Luonan forward to observe the device. The maintenance consultant had told them before that an independent workshop was different from the outside. Customers could directly enter the operating platform and observe from a close distance. They could even operate the device with the permission of the maintenance technician. Some DIY enthusiasts wanted this sort of atmosphere. They flocked like ducks to this place. Luonan was mechanically illiterate. He had no concept of operating anything, but Cragburst had served in the Coastal Defense Force for many years. He could be considered half an expert. However, he never paid attention to what Luonan had sent for repair. Now that he saw it up close, he said, "This toy looks quite familiar. It looks like a hovering target." The prototype should be the Paya Corporation's Comet Model 3 hovering target. It's a very old model. It was introduced to the market 10 years ago. Worker Zhai entered from another employee passageway and continued Cragburst's conversation. Cragburst snapped his fingers. Yes, it's the Comet Model 3. The gyroscope in the middle is actually an AI hub. It's special and it's very durable. When I was in the military, I could use it for a long time with a random target shell. It's easy to repair. The Comet Model 3 isn't hard to repair, but this product is a bit different. Worker Zhai walked to the side of the two. He wasn't tall. He was about the same height as Luonan. He had a friendly smile. But when he stood in front of the operating platform and activated the relevant privileges, all sorts of maintenance and testing equipment started up one after another. They made fine adjustments according to his position. The entire workshop seemed to revolve around him. This room of equipment can't be bought for $1 million. Cragburst turned his head to look all around with a very curious appearance. Worker Zhai answered, "The standard workshop's configuration price is $7.5 million. After 8 years of depreciation, I've added a few personal equipment here. It's convenient to use. Look, there are at least 2 areas of this hovering target that have undergone major repairs." Cragburst moved closer and discussed with Worker Zhai. "I just saw one area. The outer shell of the target has been removed and replaced with a metal net. I don't know what it's used for." "It's a fixed support, right?" Luonan relied on his memory to compare the diameter of the Tai Chi ball to the size of the hovering target. He felt that there were some differences. He then looked at the metal net that was constantly expanding and contracting, and he made a few guesses. "Fix?" Worker Zhai thought for a moment, but he didn't ask further. Instead, he gestured for the two to look over. "The net is just an accessory. The core problem doesn't lie here." As he spoke, he performed a few operations on the support. It was unknown how he did it, but he actually removed the metal net and placed it to the side. All that was left was a gyroscope-like object in the center. The gyroscope's rotor didn't move at this time, and the inner and outer frames were placed there in a well-behaved manner. Worker Zhai then controlled the mechanical arm, including the probe and other objects, to disassemble the gyroscope. The difficulty of disassembling the gyroscope this time seemed to be quite a bit lower than the flexible e-ink screen from back then. Within a short minute, the three heard a slight clicking sound. It seemed that some sort of mechanism had been activated. The gyroscope's central axis was disassembled from the top to the bottom, revealing an object that looked like broken glass. Next, Worker Zhai operated the mechanical arm and used special tweezers to pluck the object out. He placed it on a miniature support and slightly secured it. It could be seen at this time that the object's outer appearance was actually quite regular. It was rhombohedral, and it had clearly undergone precision processing. A central control chip? Cragburst asked in a low voice. His breathing slowed down a bit, afraid that he would blow this thing away. Luonen didn't speak. He just narrowed his eyes. Chapter 328. Luonen observed the rhombohedron object, as well as worker Zhai. The latter was carefully sizing up the former with great concentration. It's definitely not part of the Comet 3's design. The hovering target's control program is very simple. The main control chip has already been integrated into the shaft. And this little thing seems to be unnecessary. Cragburst asked curiously, unnecessary? Let's do an experiment. Studio 245 1 Batwing Model A Outer Shell, thank you. The last few sentences were directed at the warehouse in the maintenance center. As he spoke, worker Zhai let go of the rhombohedron object. He inspected the gyroscope's rotor and its internal and external frames, especially the disassembled central shaft. He repeated this process twice before beginning to assemble it. It was obvious that worker Zhai had deliberately ignored the tiny rhombohedron during the assembly process. He had only restored the gyroscope-shaped floating target. His speed was very fast, and he finished assembling the shell before the conveyor belt arrived. When the outer shell arrived, worker Zhai quickly stuffed the gyroscope inside. In the end, what appeared before Luonan and Cragburst's eyes was a very strange bowl-shaped object. It looked like a flying saucer that wasn't very regular. Cragburst was very familiar with this toy. The Batwing Model A target aircraft. It combines high-speed flight and emergency hovering maneuverability very well. The Model B and Model C can actually be used as simple weapons platforms. They can be used in the wilderness. Worker Zhai smiled at Cragburst. This could be considered an affirmation of his expertise. Then he let go, and the big bull target machine floated in the air with a low hum. It slowly moved horizontally, gliding past the tips of the three people's noses, and gradually accelerated. As the speed of the target plane increased, it was like a bat, flying back and forth in the narrow workshop. But there was no collision. Worker Zhai looked at the light screen to the side. Various test data was displayed on it like a waterfall. 10 seconds later he shook his head. I didn't discover any problems. As he spoke, worker Zhai cast his gaze toward the miniature support. His gaze paused for a moment under the rhombohedron object. He switched to the holographic interface and displayed the repair order that Luonan had filled out before. I need to make a confirmation. The fault you discovered, Mr. Luo. It's a Tai Chi ball that can float in the air. Luonan was very cooperative as he gave a general description of the situation. Worker Zhai thought for a moment, then asked, how heavy is the Tai Chi ball? It's half the height of a person, and it's made of hard metal. It should weigh at least a few 100 kilograms. Luonan really wasn't too sure. Worker Zhai made a sound of surprise. Cragburst coughed. Nanster, the motor of the floating target can only lift 5 kilograms at most. Worker Zhai shook his head. I don't see any changes to the floating target's propulsion and transmission mechanism. Oh, if the metal mesh is used as a support, then it can be considered a part of the transmission mechanism. However, its propulsion doesn't make sense. Is that so? Luonan only had a superficial understanding of the Tai Chi ball. It was very hard for him to answer such a question. After a moment of consideration, he could only pull up his contact list and call Shuelei. At this time, Shuelei was at home. It seemed like he was still doing a lot of training. He was panting slightly. He really didn't want to waste any time. Of course, he was familiar with the Tai Chi ball, but the problem was that he was not good with words. If he really had to describe it, he would not be able to express himself. The Taiji ball is able to continuously accumulate and transform the energy that is struck into various forms of rebounding force. It can also directly change the nature of the energy. Cragburst bumped Luonan with his shoulder. He's worthy of being your best friend. It's the same. Luonan ignored him. He still wanted to communicate with Shuelei, but Shuelei had already found a more efficient method. How about this? I recorded a video last year about training with the Tai Chi ball. I'll send it to you now. You'll understand once you see it. It's true. The video file was right next to his hand, and Shuelei immediately began to transfer it. The network environment of the repair center was quite outstanding. Luonan saw that there was a lot of bandwidth, so he simply opened up a video call, allowing Shuelei to directly participate. Shuelei and Kragburst had met before. Luonan just introduced Worker Zhai to Shuelei, and the video file was finished transferring. Worker Zhai indicated for Luonan to transfer the file to the wide hologram, and they watched it together. The video was recorded from a very monotonous angle. It was clear that Kragburst was recording himself. The location was in Gym Master Xiu's backyard. Shuelei was bare-chested, revealing a body of strong muscles. He adjusted his breathing and punched. Shuelei punched the Tai Chi ball, producing a deep sound. It was clear that Shuelei's strength was considerable. However, the Tai Chi ball only trembled slightly. This penetrative force is truly beautiful. Kragburst clicked his tongue in admiration. He was not stingy with his praise. He turned his head to face Luonan and said, "Leister is truly amazing." He sent the maximum power of his fist into the center of the Tai Chi ball. The hovering target took the brunt of the force. That's why there's such an effect. Shuelei's strikes continued without end. His speed didn't change, and the Tai Chi ball maintained its stability from beginning to end. A minute passed, and his fist suddenly increased in strength. His bare arm actually made an explosive sound out of thin air. Not only was the force of this strike fiercer, but there was also a change in the force behind it. The Tai Chi ball didn't fall back after receiving a heavy blow. Instead, it actually jumped up. It jumped over the edge of the metal bowl, reaching a height of 20 centimeters. Shuelei connected with another punch just as it was about to sink. The hovering target jumped up once more, swaying a bit. This time, it didn't come down. The Tai Chi ball, weighing several hundred kilograms, floated in the air. It was 30 centimeters above the ground, and it began to spin. Shuelei's expression was focused. The speed of his punches didn't change, but one punch after another brought with it an explosive sound. The hovering target was still swaying at first. Occasionally it would shift. But later on, the swaying became smaller and smaller, and the spinning speed grew faster and faster. The luminous patterns on its surface were visible even in broad daylight. The video ended here. Kragburst applauded and cheered. Shuelei was a bit embarrassed. Luonan looked at Worker Zhai. Worker Zhai was looking at the still image of the video. Worker Zhai was a bit spellbound. He sighed in admiration, but there wasn't much surprise in his expression. Kragburst saw Worker Zhai's expression and grinned. "What do you think? Do you see the trick yet? Can it be fixed?" Worker Zhai lowered his head and pondered for a moment. His expression was still calm. "I get the gist of it. It should be a way to store and transform external kinetic energy. The storage is like a spring. The greater the force, the greater the expected rebound. The method of transformation is quite interesting. It goes from straight force to rotational force. There's also that buoyancy. Let me do an experiment." He moved the miniature support, sending the miniature rhombohedron into a certain instrument chamber. It was fixed on all four sides. A buzzing vibration immediately rang out. It could be seen that it was imitating Shuelei's fist strength. It was transmitting external kinetic energy into the rhombohedron. Luonan adjusted the direction of the video to let Shuelei see the process of the experiment. The three people observed very attentively, but there were no changes to the miniature rhombohedron, even after a dozen or so seconds had passed. Worker Zhai wasn't in a hurry. He soon made another adjustment. This time, he directly connected the miniature rhombohedron with electricity. The voltage and current increased, but the rhombohedron within the instrument chamber still didn't have any reaction. "It's completely broken?" Shuelei was a bit disappointed. "Should we try again after it's completely restored?" Kragburst wanted to change his method. Worker Zhai didn't speak any further. He just stared at the instrument chamber and continued to make adjustments. A metal rod flipped up under the operating table as he operated. The top was shaped like a handle, and it was even wrapped in a layer of insulating cloth. When the metal rod was at a 90-degree angle with the ground, Worker Zhai pressed down on the handle at the top and took a deep breath. Luonan raised his eyebrows at this moment. Kragburst turned his head a bit later. The two locked gazes, confirming that subtle fluctuations were being produced on the mental plane. Hey. It's changed. It's changed. Shuelei discovered the changes within the instrument chamber in the first instant, through the high-speed network without any delay. Luonan and Kragburst turned their gazes, and saw several long and slender threads extending out from the outer layer of the miniature rhombohedron. They slowly swayed up and down, left and right. Chapter 329. A total of 6 fine threads extended out from the miniature rhombohedron. They swayed and floated within the chamber of the device. At first glance, it looked like a struggling alien jellyfish. Luonan pursed his lips, and his gaze focused on the interior of the device. He felt that the scene before him had a sense of déjà vu. It was as if he had seen it somewhere before. Kragburst swept a few glances before shifting his gaze to Worker Zhai. From the outside, this maintenance technician's forehead was covered in sweat from just holding the metal rod. It looked like he was working very hard. At the same time, the fluctuations on the mental plane grew more and more obvious. There was nothing much to say. Worker Zhai was an ability user. Kragburst sized up this person a few more times. He felt that this was unexpected, but reasonable. It was natural that the channel introduced by Papercut was linked to ability users. As Luonan's bodyguard, Kragburst needed to eliminate all sources of danger. But frankly speaking, it was a bit difficult to link this person to a source of danger. Worker Zhai's performance was really quite average. Such a description could be said to be polite. Kragburst was experienced and knowledgeable. He had his own yardstick in mind. Worker Zhai's performance of disturbing the mental plane just now was probably a level higher than that of the ability users Kragburst had seen before. Being able to consciously use mental strength to affect the material plane was pretty good for ordinary people, but that was all there was to it. The metal rod and its related instruments were used for amplification. If it weren't for this intermediate link, with Worker Zhai's level of mental strength, it was unknown if the interference force he formed would be able to lift up even a strand of fine hair. Kragburst relaxed after making this judgment. He noticed that Luonan was still seriously observing the device's chamber. Looking at Luonan's focused appearance, the miniature rhombohedron seemed to be more valuable than expected. A thin layer of sweat had already formed on Worker Zhai's forehead. His breathing was no longer even, but the appearance of the 6 tentacles around the rhombohedron in the device's chamber didn't change at all. Luonan finally spoke at this time. Will this toy undergo further changes? Worker Zhai took a deep breath and spoke much faster. There should be. These 6 tentacles are quite sensitive to interference force, but they haven't formed an effective structure for kinetic energy storage and transformation, let alone those related to maglev. If the Tai Chi ball itself doesn't possess a corresponding arrangement, then these tentacles are the most worthy of attention. My abilities aren't enough. Can I help? Not to mention Luonan and Kragburst, even Shuelei, who was watching from afar, sensed that something was off. He assumed that Luonan had forgotten to introduce him. He grinned and said, "So Worker Zhai is also from the society." Worker Zhai also smiled. He didn't hide it. Papercut is my recommendation, but he's still in the evaluation period. It's already been over 5 years. Shuelei exclaimed. It can't be, the evaluation is very strict? He had already prepared to join the Ability User Professional Association, and the relevant procedures had already begun. With a busybody like Zhang Yingying around, he didn't have to worry about anything. Therefore, he was still at the stage where he didn't fully understand the 3 stages of the association's assessment: awakening and vocation. When he heard 5 years, his heart skipped a beat. Worker Zhai continued to smile faintly. Luonan and Kragburst didn't explain in person. After all, speaking the truth was a bit hurtful. In terms of sensing on the mental plane, even 10 Kragbursts added together couldn't compare to Luonan. If Kragburst was able to discover the situation, then Luonan certainly wouldn't have any problems as well. Moreover, Luo Nan's situation was more detailed and vivid. From Luo Nan's perspective, Worker Zhai's mental strength and his ability to interfere with the material plane were truly too horrible to look at. Some time ago, he had a similar problem. But even if the appearance was similar, the essence was completely different. Luo Nan possessed mental strength that far exceeded normal standards, but because of the special circumstances of formatting theory, a barrier was formed between him and the material plane. In the end, he relied on coupling with the heart lantern of the eye's orifice to break through the shackles. It could be said that Worker Zhai's problem was a marvel, but his method of solving it was extraordinary. As for Worker Zhai, his problem was the simplest and most straightforward kind. His cultivation was insufficient. There was nothing praiseworthy about him on the mental plane, be it in terms of intensity or level of immersion. He simply wasn't up to standard by the standards of the society. Luo Nan remembered Zhang Yingying saying that there were 600,000 ability users in the world, but only 70,000 awakened ones. It was these 70,000 people that formed the framework of the Ability User Professional Association. Unawakened characters like Worker Zhai belonged to the category of people that the society could record, but they were normally disinclined to pay attention to. If Worker Zhai was a bit younger, like Luo Nan who was 15 or 16 years old, then perhaps there would be some anticipation. The problem was that Worker Zhai was at least 40 years old. The word potential no longer held any meaning. Worker Zhai found it harder and harder to hold on with these few words. He shook his head. Who's going to give me a hand? How? Just hold this handle and pour your strength into it. As long as you can form interference power, then it's fine. Then I'll do it. Cragburst wasn't willing to let Luo Nan touch some inexplicable things. He took a step forward and firmly grasped the metal handle after Worker Zhai released his grip. The tentacles that extended from the miniature rhombohedron had a tendency to shrink inward because Worker Zhai had released his grip. However, Cragburst didn't seem to exert much force, but the contracted tentacles suddenly protruded out by a large chunk. They even became a bit thicker. The space of the device's chamber became much narrower, so much so that the tentacles had to continuously coil in order to accommodate them. Soon, the four people could clearly see that 5 forks had silently separated from each tentacle. They were finer than the tentacles of the previous level, and they were slowly elongating. There were a total of 36 filaments. They crisscrossed from time to time to form a marvelous dynamic pattern. This is amazing. Shuelei's attention was immediately drawn back. He scratched his head as he watched. There are other mechanisms in this toy? Cragburst was blinking as well. It was as if he was recalling something. He asked Worker Zhai, "Is this okay?" Wait a moment. Worker Zhai used the scanning device to analyze the dynamic pattern formed by the tentacles. He formed a simple diagram and transferred it to the holographic screen. Then he began to operate and make corrections. In a short 10 seconds, there was a dynamic pattern. It appeared one after another, appearing in succession. It was like an animated short film. There was a clear sequence to it. The structure of the kinetic energy conversion is okay, but it's still not enough. Again? Watch me. Cragburst didn't pass on this responsibility. He added 2 more layers of force as he chatted and laughed. However, there was no further reaction from the device's chamber. Worker Zhai indicated for Cragburst to look at the dashboard below the metal rod. Continue. It's fine as long as the needle doesn't enter the red zone. Then I'm going to play for real. Cragburst grinned. A layer of dark red radiance seemed to suffuse his bronze-skinned face. Even his pupils revealed a scarlet color. His 5 fingers moved a bit on the metal handle. He was just about to exert force when he heard, "Stop!" Cragburst instinctively withdrew his force. He glanced at the dashboard, but he saw that the needle had already made a large jump. It had nearly entered the red zone. I haven't even used my strength yet. Your interference ability is too rough. It's not suitable. Worker Zhai turned his gaze to the other side as he spoke. Chapter 330. Luo Nan understood tacitly when he saw Worker Zhai cast a gaze at him. Let me try. Hey. I'm using a penetrating strength. But Cragburst didn't let go. He was a bit unconvinced, but he was still wary on a deeper level. You tell me first. Let's not talk about Nanster. I don't seem to be much worse than Shuele. If he can activate the effects, why can't I? Worker Zhai responded warmly. I'm thinking about it. There are 2 reasons. First, my amplification device is more suited to mental ability users. You are a typical fleshly body enhanced. Your interference direction is different. Second, this miniature rhombohedron is perhaps more like our wristbands. Daily usage is one layer, developer options are another layer. Cragburst rubbed his big bald head. He felt that what Worker Zhai said made some sense. He cast his gaze at Luonan, who nodded. Worker Zhai's operation just now was extremely precise and meticulous. His mental strength borrowed the minute electric current of the device to realize the amplification of interference on the material plane. But when it came to you, Brother Cragburst, the amplification device's effects were completely destroyed. So it's like this. Cragburst nodded. When he looked at Worker Zhai, his gaze was a bit different. Is it electron affinity? This ability is quite good. It's especially suited for maintenance. It's like adding wings to a tiger. Which place doesn't need electricity nowadays? Worker Zhai laughed involuntarily. It's not suited. It's necessary. I'm a mental ability user. If I can't realize electron affinity, then further research would be wishful thinking. As he spoke, he cast his gaze at Luonan. His thoughts were rather complicated. I don't even dare to think about Mr. Luo's eyesight. We amateurs who haven't entered the door are truly left in the dust when compared to the awakened. Well, Nanster is a special case. As Cragburst spoke, he made room for Luonan. He added, I feel like I've seen this toy somewhere before. Luonan didn't speak. He took a step forward and grasped the metal rod. When Cragburst let go, the tentacles of the miniature rhombohedron retracted. Luonan didn't release his power in time. He didn't make any further movements until the tentacles were completely retracted. What's wrong? Cragburst didn't understand. Probably just observing. Worker Zhai was a precision-oriented, mentally enhanced. Even though he was unable to observe Luonan's movements on the mental plane, he was able to guess the corresponding train of thought. Cragburst said, Oh. He felt a bit embarrassed for being so suspicious of Worker Zhai just now. He pressed down on his earlobe and made a gesture for members of the society. Let's add each other as friends. Worker Zhai smiled bitterly and waved his hand. I'm sorry I can't. You don't have an ID on the psychic wave network? There's one, but it's hard to use. Worker Zhai shook his head again. I do have some mental strength, but it's not enough to interfere with reality at any time. That's why I've only been able to wander around the periphery of the circle these past few years, relying on my craftsmanship to make a living. Fortunately, Papercut took care of me and often introduced me to some work. There was no doubt that Luonan had been introduced in this manner. Cragburst said in surprise. It can't be that bad? I can see that your interference force is on point. That's in this studio. Outside of here, I'm no different from an ordinary person. Worker Zhai glanced at Luonan. He saw that Luonan still hadn't made a move, so he turned his head back and said, Papercut has put in quite a bit of effort. He's tried to help me with the awakening ritual, but I'm limited by my talent. I've only gained a bit of an affinity with electrons over the past 5 years. I'm still far from being able to do anything else. I need to rely on a hearing aid in order to use the hexa-ear and access the psychic wave network. Right now, I've only reached the 2nd level. I can only watch television, listen to the radio, and so on. I have no way of interacting with others. A hearing aid? Did you design it yourself? Cragburst was able to understand that this was a type of amplification device. He was a bit curious. The people of the society, as long as they're involved in mechanical and electronic design, amplification devices have always been a hot topic. The larger the measurement, the better. You're talking about the 4-dimensional measurement. Worker Zhai was a technician. He always paid attention to similar theories. Right when he was about to discuss a thing or two with Cragburst, Luonan suddenly let out a long breath. His palm left the metal rod. The miniature rhombohedron was still in its initial state within the device's chamber. Compared to Worker Zhai and Kragburst's progress, it was a complete and utter regression. Xuele, who was watching from afar, didn't participate in the conversation between Kragburst and Worker Zhai. He focused on observing Luo Nan's methods from beginning to end. But the more he watched, the more disappointed he became. Nanster, is it no good? I want to take it out and give it a try. Luo Nan turned his head to look at Worker Zhai. This device won't be of much help to me. The direction of its amplification is mainly in strength. I feel that it would be better to go a bit deeper. Depth, strength, sensitivity, and affinity. These were the four-dimensional measurement that Worker Zhai had just mentioned. They were the four basic measurement standards that the society used for mental strength. There wasn't any particularly rigorous logic or scientific basis in these measurements. They were mainly established by common usage, reflecting the fuzziness of the research of supernatural powers in the current era. Worker Zhai didn't have any objections. My specialty is in electronic equipment and mechanical design. I'm considering the internal structure of this thing. As for the mental domain, you have the final say. He opened the device chamber as he spoke, and the miniature rhombohedron was mounted on the support. It moved out and stopped at the outer edge of the workbench. Luo Nan gave it a few more glances and asked, Worker Zhai, you just said that just the kinetic energy conversion structure isn't enough. You mean? From the situation shown in the video, there are at least two structures that aren't shown. Maglev and energy storage. Also, I want to know where the power components are located. Worker Zhai casually drew several structural sketches on the hologram, corresponding to the kinetic energy conversion structure. From a conventional train of thought, the miniature rhombohedron is more like an integrated circuit. It's not a problem to use it in electronic equipment, but what kind of work is needed to drive the several 100-kilogram Tai Chi ball? Those tentacles are a good choice. It's fine as long as the transmission and work parts are combined together. But I haven't discovered the corresponding structural design. Luo Nan had a general understanding. What Worker Zhai means is that there should be more tentacles to form more structures. Worker Zhai used an electronic pen to tap the hologram. Dynamic, precise, and sufficiently firm. Kragburst listened to them speak, and a certain train of thought from before resurfaced. It became clearer and clearer, separated only by a thin layer of paper. He rubbed his forehead forcefully. Tentacles. Structure. Precision. Huh. What's that again? Luo Nan laughed and asked. In other words, the miniature rhombohedron driving the Tai Chi ball is very likely to be accomplished through those tentacles? Worker Zhai nodded, and Kragburst clapped his hands forcefully. Holy crap! The dynamo core. Luo Nan didn't say anything more. He took a deep breath, and his towering iceberg-like mental strength resonated with the heart lantern of the eye's orifice. Incorporeal lightning crackled and scuttled, forming a seemingly substantial bolt of lightning in the depths of the cracks in his eyes. The miniature rhombohedron inexplicably trembled at the focus of his gaze. This object couldn't compare to the external neuron. It couldn't compare to Jack's deep-sea Type 4. But the sparkle on the mental plane, and the corresponding spark of lightning in Luo Nan's eyes truly belonged to the dynamo core. Chapter 332. 6 tentacles extended out from the miniature rhombohedron within the workshop, followed by a second layer. This time, the tentacles were even more slender. There were 6 main trunks and 30 secondary branches. The scale was already far above the core rhombohedron. Several dozen tentacles undulated and fluttered. If one did not have a predetermined view, it was likely that they would have overlooked the existence of the rhombohedron. The current situation was no different from the situation in the device chamber. At most, the tentacles extended a bit more. It was just that the 3 people in the workshop were much more serious than before. Luo Nan squinted his eyes, adjusting the glow of the heart lantern of the eye's orifice. Kragburst shifted his feet lightly to adjust the angle of the heart lantern. As for Worker Zhai, he brought a portable microscope with him. He switched lenses from time to time, searching for a suitable focal length. Are there any changes? Xuele was limited by his long-range view. He was unable to distinguish the details clearly. He blinked a dozen times, but he was unable to see anything. In the end, Worker Zhai gave a response. He said, "Wait a moment." He took a piece of tin foil from the workbench and rolled it into a strip. He carefully extended it over, using the tip to streak across the empty region of the tentacle structure. The tip of the tin foil was soon obstructed, and it bent a bit. Under the illumination of the workshop's lights, a thin stream of light streaked across the empty region. It was unremarkable, but it was still captured by the others. "There's something." Shui Lei immediately understood. It was very likely that there was an even finer structure in the empty region of the tentacle structure. However, its composition had already surpassed the limits of what the naked eye could see. Worker Zhai slowly pulled back the tin foil, but the tip of the tin foil inexplicably tore as soon as he pulled back his elbow. It was as if an invisible blade had sliced through it. The front half of the tin foil first broke off, and then it shattered. During this period, it could be seen that the 36 tentacles didn't have any obvious changes. Instead, a subtle trembling sound rang out in the workshop. The source was from the tentacle structure. "Careful! Careful!" Cragburst pressed down with his hands, indicating for Worker Zhai to take it gently. Worker Zhai thought for a moment, and simply flicked the second half of the tin foil toward the top of the tentacle structure, letting it fall freely. As expected, the tin foil tumbled a few times in midair. Before it could make contact with any of the visible tentacles, it was crushed into powder by the invisible strangulation. The sound of breathing had disappeared from the workshop, and the trembling sound of the tentacle structure grew clearer. Worker Zhai turned to look at Luo Nan. Luo Nan's gaze still lingered on the rhombohedron. Worker Zhai spoke softly. "Did you see it?" Cragburst curled his lips. "You're just showing off your superior spirit, dog die." Beside him, Worker Zhai smiled bitterly. From this point of view he, an unawakened spiritually enhanced individual, was worse than a dog. Fortunately, after choosing the engineering specialization route, he could rely on the assistance of equipment, and he could do more. A series of cracking sounds rang out from beneath the workbench. A circle of white boards rose up in a slanted manner, looking like a coarse calyx. The tentacle structure was half enclosed within, forcing Luo Nan and Cragburst to retreat. Several spotlights lit up above, adjusting their angles so that the light could penetrate the visible and invisible tentacle structure, and cast a shadow on the whiteboard. F*C Kami. Cragburst was caught off guard. On the snow whiteboard, there seemed to be thousands of snakes wriggling, constantly changing according to the angle of the light. They could see clearly now. Through the special light projection, the 36 strands, which were thinner than strands of hair, became thumb-thick on the board. And between them, a densely packed shadow spider web was woven. Thus, everyone confirmed that there was a layer of even finer strands that couldn't be seen with the naked eye between the two layers of 36 strands. The strands were densely woven like a web, forming an even more complex and precise structure. Worker Zhai operated the computer and cut the shadow spider web from multiple angles together. It didn't take long for a relatively complete 3D structure to be formed. It appeared on the workbench in the form of a projection. Luo Nan's gaze went back and forth between the real thing and the 3D projection. Cragburst couldn't see through it, so he simply asked, "How many strands are there in total?" "The current count is 1,276 strands." Worker Zhai swept his eyes over the data and then sighed. "The structure just now needs to be completely replaced. There's also the material analysis. The resources allocated to me may not be enough. They may not be suitable either." Cragburst didn't understand. "What?" "There's a supercomputer here in the Electronic City. Its name is Crossover. With my privileges, I can request a portion of the resources. Actually, I'm using it right now. Its main purpose is to analyze the dynamic structure." Worker Zhai pointed at the holographic screen. Page after page of diagrams flashed by at high speed. They were all structural diagrams extracted from the shadow spider web that had just been confirmed. Over 1,000 diagrams had flashed by in the time Worker Zhai spoke. "It looks pretty fast, huh? You can't provide effective parameters, so you can only rely on the method of exhaustion. It's meaningless. This is because it's impossible for the computer to understand how a glass-like object can split into over 1,000 tentacles, of varying thicknesses, far surpassing the size of its storage capacity. These tentacles are in a state when they're coiled up, and how they function when they're released. Worker Zhai sighed when he spoke to this point, especially when the stimulating factor involves the mental plane. If this is the case, the mainstream engineering of humanity isn't ready yet. I'm powerless to do anything for the time being. Shuelei let out a sigh, a little disappointed. Cragburst shook his big bald head, and sighed along with Worker Zhai. However, his mentality was more stable than everyone else's. He turned to look at Luonan. It's a big discovery. What do you think? Should we transfer it to the society to take a look? Luonan didn't respond immediately. He just asked Worker Zhai, "Can I put it away now?" Worker Zhai was actually a bit reluctant, but he couldn't find a reason to refuse. He just nodded with a bitter smile. Luonan closed his eyes slightly, isolating the effects of the heart lantern of the eye's orifice. The 3 layers of over 1,000 tentacles, whether they were tangible or intangible, all retracted back. The volume of the miniature rhombohedron didn't show any obvious changes. Worker Zhai couldn't be bothered to tidy up his workbench. He operated the portable microscope with one hand and moved closer to the miniature rhombohedron. He clicked his tongue in wonder. Luonan moved to the side, and Cragburst understood. The two walked to the side and conversed in low voices. What's the difference between Jack's Deep Sea Type 4 and this one? Is it also a 3-layer structure that extends little by little? 3 layers? I don't understand this. I only skimmed through the report. Cragburst did his best to recall, but he was unable to grasp the gist of it. In the end he simply said, "Just contact the branch's laboratory. You're one of the parties involved, and your operations score is near the top. You certainly have the right to access and consult. It's fine as long as you don't leak it. Hee, that's how it is. Not many people cared in the past." Yeah, not many people cared. Luonan curled his lips. Cragburst was a bit embarrassed. Leaking on all sides was a tradition of the society, and Luonan was the newest victim of this tradition. As such, he couldn't help but be a bit hesitant. Let the branch's laboratory handle this. You'll certainly need to explain the ins and outs of this matter. Is that okay? Leister, what's your opinion? Luonan looked at Shuelei. Shuelei was a bit hesitant. Shuelei didn't understand the significance of the dynamo core, but he could see that this toy was far from simple. He didn't expect that repairing the device would cause complications, and that the implications weren't small. Don't think too much about it. The prophet is the gym master. Listen to his opinion. Luonan saw that Shuelei was in a difficult position, so he simply declared, "This is the gym master's personal property. We stole it from the Daoguan. Even if we did it out of good intentions, we would leak our privacy. How would we explain this to the gym master later?" Shuelei let out a breath of relief and nodded over and over. Luonan looked at Cragburst and Worker Zhai. Cragburst made a zipping motion with his mouth, while Worker Zhai had just recovered from his research state. He laughed and said, "Protecting the privacy of our customers is a basic principle of technicians." "Then that's good." Luonan nodded to express his thanks. Shuelei asked again, "Should I tell the gym master now?" Luonan hesitated for a moment. His gaze cast toward the miniature rhombohedron, and then he turned to look at the 3-dimensional projection and the simplified diagram that appeared on the holographic screen. A long time passed before he opened his mouth, but he gave an irrelevant answer. "This diagram? I don't understand it." The other 3 were a bit stupefied. Luonan took a step forward and swiped his hand across the holographic screen, looking at the simplified diagram that had already been swept past. Under the deduction of the allocated supercomputer resources, the structural diagram of the dynamo core appeared endlessly and was revised. From a layman's point of view, it was concise, but the corresponding professional symbols were like heavenly books. It was hard to understand. He originally wanted to use his habitual thinking methods of coupling, configuration, and so on to deconstruct it. But a few thoughts ran through his mind, and he gave up for now. He turned his head and asked, "Worker Zhai, these diagrams are too professional. Can you teach me a bit?" "Which parts?" "All of them." Worker Zhai was a bit startled, but he soon laughed. "It's a long story." The frequency at which Luo Nan's fingers swiped was far from being able to keep up with the speed of the supercomputer's analysis. It didn't take long for Luo Nan to give up, allowing the simple diagrams to sweep past. But the thoughts that popped up before became clearer and more stable. "I want to learn from the beginning. I've always been mediocre in physics. I don't even need to talk about electronic engineering and mechanical design. It would naturally be best if I could make up for it." Worker Zhai looked a few more times, and he suddenly realized that the society member before him, who had already reached a higher level, was still a student. He skimmed over the relevant information. His age of 16 was very eye-catching. "What year are you in high school this year?" "First year." "You're interested in engineering?" "It's useful." Luo Nan was very frank. He started from a completely practical point of view. "I want to understand these structural diagrams. I need to have a concept at the very least." Worker Zhai shook his head and emphasized once more, "I can't do it in a short amount of time." On the other side, Cragburst had already been tripped by Luo Nan's train of thought. He simply rolled his eyes. "Weren't we discussing confidentiality issues? You even said that you wanted to confess to that gym master Xiao and be lenient. After it's fixed." Luo Nan cut off Cragburst's words and looked at Shuelei. "The gym master has a strange temper. I can't predict what kind of reaction he will have. If I ask him in a muddle-headed manner, we might not be able to talk. Leister, let's keep this a secret for now. Wait for me to figure out the reasoning behind this, then we'll return it to its owner, okay?" "Okay." Shuelei was actually stupefied, especially when he looked directly into Luo Nan's eyes. Even though Luo Nan's eyes were separated by a layer of contact lenses, and even though the photoelectric signal was transmitted and restored, Luo Nan's gaze was still blazing to the point of terror. He had never seen Luo Nan like this in his memories. "Wait a minute. Wait a minute." Cragburst raised his hands in an attempt to calm Luo Nan down. "You said you're going to fix it. How are you going to fix it? And you're going to find the branch's laboratory? This is a contradiction. Let me tell you, even the branch's laboratory might not be able to grasp the relevant technology." Luo Nan didn't speak. He just swept his gaze across the room, from Worker Zhai to Cragburst, to Shuelei, and then to his own hands. Everyone had a share. Chapter 333. Cragburst was stupefied when Luo Nan's gaze swept over him, but he quickly came to a realization. He immediately shrunk back. "Don't talk about self-reliance. Helping each other won't do either. That's what you spiritual dogs should do. I'm a muscle type. You might as well let me kill my way into the headquarters." Luo Nan wasn't counting on him. He laughed and shifted his gaze. "Worker Zhai, I'll have to trouble you with this matter." Worker Zhai opened his mouth, but in the end he could only shake his head and smile bitterly. He had already expressed his helplessness on this matter many times. He was not being courteous, but had come to the final conclusion after evaluating the resources and technology involved. How could it be solved with just a please? He heard Luo Nan speak again. "I know that I can't be impatient, and I never thought that I would see results in a month or two. I want to take this opportunity to ask you to help me lay the foundation." Luo Nan wasn't someone who was good with words. He stopped speaking at this point, and saw that Worker Zhai didn't refuse on the spot. Luo Nan followed his train of thought and continued. "I'm also on the mentally enhanced side. I'm also on the precision path. Brother Papercut also said that I should naturally get involved in the maintenance profession. I'll learn from you and you'll teach me. We can even exchange pointers." Cragburst saw that Luo Nan was having a hard time organizing his words. He couldn't help but speak up. "You guys just happen to learn from each other." These words reminded Worker Zhai of something. His eyes lit up as he realized that this 16-year-old high school student was already an official member of the society. In terms of mental cultivation, he was definitely far above him. Luonan was able to have such accomplishments at such a young age. Aside from his peerless talent, Luonan should have quite a set of cultivation techniques. At the very least, Luonan's was much stronger than his wild fox Zen. In this way, not only would they be able to learn from each other, they would also be able to exchange what they need. He had spent many years outside the entrance of the association. Although he was open-minded, it was still a burden on his mind. Now that there was a new opportunity, Worker Zhai could not help but be tempted. But when he looked at the complicated structure of the shadow spider web, and the thousands of diagrams on the screen, he felt a dull pain in his head. Agreeing to Luonan's request was easy, but Luonan's ultimate goal was still the dynamo core. Luonan didn't even have a basic direction for this. It wasn't his style to deceive himself and others. Worker Zhai unconsciously sighed again. Luonan knew that Worker Zhai's state of mind had changed somewhat, but there was still a hurdle in the bottom of his heart that could not be overcome. He thought for a moment and walked to the workbench. I heard you say that you're missing parameters, right? Worker Zhai's mind was in a mess. He took off his portable microscope and gently pinched the space between his eyebrows. Actually, it's a problem with the direction of research. The conversion of kinetic energy was only the simplest step. How to store it, how to do the work, and how to present it in such a precise structure. There are too many things involved. I don't know much about engineering, but if you want to talk about direction, I suggest this as a starting point. Do you have a pen? Luonan asked for a digital pen as he spoke. He drew a diagram on the 3D projection area, on the shadow spiderweb. With years of experience in sketching, the electronic pen's glowing lines were smooth and smooth. With just a few arcs, it drew a ball at the front of the thickest tentacle. Then the tip of the pen cut the surface of the sphere, drawing a tetrahedron. Then at the outer edge, sticking to the end of the tetrahedron, he drew an even larger sphere. Worker Zhai saw the entire process of Luonan's operation clearly. He also saw the diagram Luonan drew clearly. He was immediately stupefied. Sphere. Tetrahedron. Sphere. 3 diagrams. They were nested layer by layer. Their relationships were clear, and the areas where the diagrams connected and covered overlapped a great deal with the 3-layered tentacle structure of the dynamo core. It was not a rigid correspondence, but there was a sense of harmony that was pleasing to the eye. In the field of engineering, simple feelings were unreliable, but feelings were often the precursor to success. Archetype format? Cragburst blurted out, but then he quickly corrected himself under Luonan's blazing gaze. Formatting theory. What a coincidence. It's quite a coincidence. There's no harm in giving it a try. Luonan did not understand mechanical design, but he knew that when it came to the dynamo core, he would be pleasantly surprised if he used formatting theory. This point had already been proven by Jack. He threw down the digital pen and turned around. Worker Zhai, this is what I'm thinking. There's no harm in giving it some more thought. We can keep in touch at any time. Worker Zhai's gaze was glued to the 3D diagram. He reckoned that he would not be able to remove it for a while. Luonan and Cragburst bid their farewells and left. They did not take the hovering target when they left. The miniature rhombohedron was also left behind. Worker Zhai had no objections to this. Basically, they had already reached an agreement to cooperate. It could be foreseen that this agreement would last for quite a long time. Even with formatting theory as a reference, it was absolutely not a simple task to completely see through the mysteries of the dynamo core. Shuelei hung up the call. He was having a headache about how to hide this matter for a longer period of time. As for Luonan, he sat in the SUV with his brows furrowed in deep thought. Cragburst could not help but ask, "Where are we going now?" "The branch's laboratory." "We're going to the Shangding building." Luonan came back to his senses. "What I mean is that I need the branch's laboratory's research materials related to the dynamo core. All of them. I also need to follow up on the follow-up progress." "What's there to ponder about? Just directly read it." "And then I'll be watched and monitored?" Cragburst grinned. Reading the materials wasn't a problem, but according to Luonan's words, he needed to follow up on the research. He needed to be deeply involved. This could indeed attract the attention of people with ulterior motives. Then let's switch things up again. Let Secretary he help. It'll be done in a few minutes. An intermediary company is fine too. Speaking of which, those intermediary agents and whatnot have been suppressed quite miserably. Secretary he is quite skilled at finding entry points. The so-called intermediaries and agents were some internal members of the society. They were hired by external powers. They relied on their membership privileges to resell the society's internal resources. After the operation against Jack last time, a few intermediaries were commissioned by Quantum Corporation to buy back the relevant equipment at a high price. They bought back nearly all of the seized equipment. Cragburst still didn't feel that reading the materials was difficult. His train of thought diverged as he said, "A while ago, a bunch of intermediaries were fiercely raising the price of the dynamo core. Now they've all stopped. I heard that the financial backer behind them has changed? I'm talking about Quantum Corporation." "Not right now." Luonan shook his head. The financial backer Cragburst was talking about was Luonan's old friend, Yin Yongbua. Yin Yongbua hadn't been having a good time recently. He flew back and forth between Xia City and Luo City, transforming into a flying man. Even so, his position in the company was still on the verge of collapse. The enemy's situation was unstable. This alleviated some of the pressure on Luonan. Cragburst still didn't know where Luonan wanted to go after talking for a long time. He was just about to ask again when a call came through on the psychic wave network. "Ying? I'm on duty today." "That's right. Boss Luo's personal bodyguard. He's right next to me." Cragburst spoke a few words before transferring the call to the SUV's portable multimedia system. The control panel lit up, and the upper body of Zhang Yingying's image appeared. Zhang Yingying was dressed in tight-fitting clothes. There was a bit of sweat on her forehead, and a few strands of hair stuck to her hair. A snow-white towel hung from her neck. She was the same as Shuelei from before. She had undergone a large amount of exercise. She waved at Luonan and beamed. "Hello, Boss Luo. Are you interested in swapping pointers? Let me experience your heart lantern of the eye's orifice." Next time. Luonan gave a simple answer. Zhang Yingying's invitation lacked sincerity. She waved her hand and ignored it. She changed the subject. "There's something I wanted to talk to you about on Monday. Since we bumped into each other, I'll mention it. There's money to be made. Do you want it?" Luonan frowned. "What money?" Zhang Yingying raised an eyebrow. "The money to buy the Devil Ray. Don't tell me you've collected enough." Luonan was very frank. "I haven't found a way yet." "Really?" Zhang Yingying laughed even more happily. "I'll give you a chance to do odd jobs. Do you want it?" "Odd jobs? Earn 60 million by doing odd jobs?" Luonan didn't say anything. He just looked at Zhang Yingying with cold eyes. Zhang Yingying was dissatisfied. "What kind of look is that? No one's scamming you. Our company recently expanded our business, but we don't have enough manpower. We haven't had any capable newcomers recently, so we want to subcontract out a few. The pay is quite generous. Even if we can't fill your hole, we can still make up for it. Be frank. Do you agree or not? Give me a reply." Cragburst laughed from the side. "You need to sign up for a project when doing business. What if it's a gigolo, a princess, or something like that? Do we accept it or not?" Zhang Yingying grinned in amusement. She didn't get angry. She turned her head and shouted, "Boss, Cragburst said that you went to a nightclub to sell." Holy crap! Cragburst's majestic body instantly shrunk twice. He hated that he couldn't stuff himself under the driver's seat. Even Luonan instinctively leaned back a bit. Zhang Yingying laughed loudly. Of course, Her Majesty Empress Wu wasn't by her side, but the effect was still excellent. Cragburst came back to his senses and immediately cursed. "You're just a fox exploiting the tiger's might. A fox is so pretty." Zhang Yingying's hands extended to the top of her head. She held her index and middle fingers together, and she nimbly crooked them twice. Cragburst spat. "You're a freaking rabbit." Luonan couldn't help but grin. Zhang Yingying winked at Luonan. She beamed as she sent Luonan some information. "This is the details of our subcontracted business. Time is tight." Hurry up and give us a reply. Oh right. The boss also wanted me to tell you that thanks to you, she's had quite a few social engagements recently. She's earned quite a bit of quick money, and there are people chasing after her. You're welcome. The smile on Luo Nan's face faded as he spoke. Zhang Yingying was clearly saying that quite a few people were trying to get Her Majesty Empress Wu's tacit approval from within the Xia City branch. This was within Luo Nan's expectations. Hey, aren't you worried? What's the point of worrying? People's hearts don't grow in my stomach. Cragburst coughed. Yingying probably wants you to go pay your respects and recognize her as your godmother. Go die. Zhang Yingying gave him the middle finger in a straightforward manner. You won't even be able to find the door if the boss doesn't speak. Then she gave Luo Nan a smile. Relax. Relax. Don't let your imagination run wild. Don't frown all day long. The boss and the president are watching. Headquarters won't be able to play their tricks a second time. As for making money, that's even easier. We ability users just need to find the right path. We can make money lying down. Cragburst blurted out. Then we're still selling. Chapter 334. Zhang Yingying didn't talk for too long. She chatted with them for a bit before hanging up. The information she sent arrived at this time. Luo Nan looked it up through the hexa ear while Cragburst smacked the steering wheel and laughed mischievously. This sister is too noisy. Of course she has a good heart. Luo Nan understood what he meant and nodded. I know. The first time he met Zhang Yingying, she was certainly quick-witted and lively, but she had a temperament that never gave way to others. She wouldn't give up until she seized the upper hand. But not only did she give Cragburst the opportunity to talk about her just now, she even put on a self-mocking attitude, stirring up the atmosphere quite lively. Luo Nan couldn't help but laugh when he thought of Zhang Yingying's finger curling. But his smile soon vanished and he spoke softly. I seem to be quite depressed recently. Otherwise, with Zhang Yingying's temperament, why would she deliberately make him happy? Cragburst laughed loudly. You're stressed, right? That's normal. At your age, if you're still giggling and carefree after bearing all these things, then you really need to see a doctor. Really? That's normal? Of course it's normal. Back when I was in the Coast Defense Force, every time there was a rushing tide. You know what a rushing tide is, right? It's when a large number of mutants use the astronomical spring tide as an opportunity to attack the coast defense line. It's called a landslide and a tsunami. It blots out the sky and covers the earth. Cragburst started the car, and the jeep drove out of the parking lot amidst the rumbling of the engine. It merged into the low-altitude magnetic rail of the electronic city. He continued to speak. After the warning and before the start of the battle, it's the most torturous time. There are even suicides in the barracks. A good portion of them are seasoned veterans who have experienced hundreds of battles. It's very likely that they'll survive even if they enter the battlefield. Humans have a limit to their endurance. Once the limit is exceeded, they become a freak. They're done for. But I can see that you're fine. You're far from your limit. Cragburst extended his hand as he spoke. The distance between his thumb and middle finger was quite considerable. Luo Nan laughed and sighed after laughing. There are still changes. He had a feeling that his reactions were a bit different when he encountered trouble. One had to know that what had just been discovered in the electronic city was the dynamo core. His father had secretly gifted him a mystical item, the key to allowing an altered human like Jack to become a burner. The level of mysterious technology that Earth's technology had yet to reach. And it even involved the mysterious power that was hidden behind the colossus that was Quantum Corporation. If this was a month ago, he would have disregarded everything and rushed to the Taoist gym to find the gym master and ask him about it. He would have pestered him to death to get an answer. But now, even though his conviction to research the dynamo core was firm, it was still a long way to go, even if his heart was about to be torn apart by an intense desire. Why? It was probably because he had some misgivings. In just a month or so, he had made enemies one after another, and they were all powerful forces in the world. After a few times, Even a newborn calf's horns would be flattened. Luo Nan had a faint premonition that what awaited him in front of him was a deadly minefield. It was fine if he didn't trigger it, but once he did, he wouldn't even have the chance to turn back. Sharpening one's tools was the right choice. But on the other hand, waiting in ambush also came with a price. All sorts of thoughts couldn't help but emerge in his mind. They interweaved into a dense and gloomy net, and the pressure followed him like a shadow. Indeed, he hadn't reached his limit, but he wasn't far from being a freak. Cragburst drove his car through the flow of traffic. He shot a glance at Luo Nan and grinned. "Nanster, I need to say a few words to you. Since you're a man, everyone has pressure. You can find ways to vent, but you can't show it on your face. Otherwise, people will look down on you." Vent? Cigarettes, alcohol, women. Pooh. I'm talking about learning, and learning. Turning pressure into motivation. Luo Nan copied Zhang Yingying and gave Cragburst the middle finger. Cragburst was a bit embarrassed. "Don't look into the minor details. What I'm saying is that we can't let the weekend go to waste. If you don't have any plans, I'll arrange a place for everyone to relax." Cigarettes, alcohol, and women? Don't be a bad kid. Cragburst's rough voice cut off Luo Nan's thoughts. Luo Nan laughed and asked, "Where's the Trigate district?" "It's between the main city district and Man City. It's almost 200 kilometers away. Why are we going there?" "Nothing. I saw the information Yingying sent over. It says that the partner is Trigate Security LLC. They're registered in the Trigate district. I've never heard of them before." "Oh, this used to be the camp of the Xia City garrison troops. It was removed not too long ago. The security company you're talking about should have a military background. Not bad. It's quite easy to earn money from the government and the military at this stage. What kind of business is it?" Luo Nan read from the information. Native species, genetic and ecological maintenance. What? Cragburst didn't hear it clearly for the first time. Luo Nan repeated the information, clearly reading the relevant introduction. "It's a patrol and reconnaissance business. It's related to mutants." F***CK. What a scam. Cragburst smacked the steering wheel with force and the horn exploded. This time it was Luo Nan who didn't understand. "This business isn't good?" "It has nothing to do with business. I'm saying that as long as there's a similar business, it means that the government and the military are scamming the common people. F***CK. What the hell are the garrison troops doing?" Cragburst transformed into a furious youth in an instant. Luo Nan flipped through the information and slowly came to an understanding. Native species, genetic and ecological maintenance was a long and awkward name. Using one word to describe it, it was mending the pen after the sheep is lost. The mutants that were isolated in the wilderness and the ocean would occasionally break through layers upon layers of defense due to special circumstances. They would appear within the city of Xia City. This business was responsible for searching and killing these infiltrating mutants to ensure the safety of the city. Speaking of which, there were quite a few mutants within the city of Xia City. It was quite popular for rich families to raise one or two mutants. The Great Maw Basilisk that Ru Awen had killed, and the Flying Devil Ray that Luo Nan had subdued were all mutants. But these mutants had all gone through strict inspection and quarantine procedures. Their negative effects were already reduced to the minimum. The fellows that had accidentally infiltrated were different. They often carried highly pathogenic bacteria. There were even some that had broken through reproductive isolation and were able to reproduce with Earth's native species for the next generation. Once the related mixed blood species spread out within the city's ecosystem, a few small mutations could lead to a great disaster under the enormous impetus of the population. The hidden destructive power of these mutants was even more astonishing than the mutants on the surface. Cragburst reached out and patted Luo Nan on the shoulder. "The task is arduous and glorious. That's what you say when you clean up the mess of the government and the military." Luo Nan grunted but said, "It's more suitable for me." "That's right. From what I remember, there aren't many who are stronger than you in reconnaissance. But this is very time-consuming and patience-consuming." "Hey, that's not right? Cragburst suddenly came to a realization. Luo Nan was still a student. His extracurricular studies were very arduous. How could he have the free time to run around the city with someone else? Chapter 335. In November, it was said that the Arctic glaciers were melting. The weather was abnormal. A cold current flowed south, pushing the moist and cold sea winds through the city. Xia City, a coastal city, became unworthy of its name in the blink of an eye. It was as if winter had arrived a month earlier. A layer of frost had actually formed on the windows of the classroom in the morning. Fortunately, this physics class was held in a large classroom. 300 people were packed to the brim. The entire classroom was quite warm without the need for any heating equipment. Luonan sat in a row near the window. He was attentively listening to the lecture and taking notes. Various knowledge points, as well as their corresponding diagrams and formulas, were displayed on the standard holographic screen. They were divided into categories and arranged in a clear order. Luonan's serious attitude made him look like a good seedling of a gifted student. If Shuelei hadn't been classmates with Luonan for over a month, Shuelei might have been confused just by looking at Luonan's current performance. "Hey, don't you have an appointment this morning?" "It's a meeting." Luonan didn't even raise his head as he corrected him. "What time?" "9:30. "You're leaving after class?" "I'll go with you." "You want to skip class?" Shuelei was baffled. "How do I go if I don't skip class?" "Then I won't go. The agreement doesn't require me to show up in person." Luonan made Shuelei dizzy with just a few words. The bell for the end of class rang at this time, signifying the end of the first class of the morning. The lecturer indicated for a temporary break, and the classroom rumbled with voices. It suddenly became noisy. Luonan continued to adjust the structure of the notes on the holographic screen. The core content did not come from him. It was Worker Zhai's handwriting. It practically covered all the knowledge points of the high school level. All Luonan needed to do was fill in the details and do the corresponding high-intensity exercises. Needless to say, Luonan felt his thoughts become much clearer after a few tutoring sessions with Worker Zhai. There were some immediate results. Luonan was neither fast nor slow, but Shuelei was even more confused. He simply gave Luonan a push. "What does it mean?" "It means that you have to split your attention and become an incarnation. You have to take care of both sides." And so on and so forth. Shuelei's eyes went wide as he listened. Luonan finally finished adjusting the notes while he was in a daze. He stretched his back. Coincidentally, a student opened the window. The damp and cold wind poured in, clashing with the heating inside the room. It actually jolted the spirits of a few drowsy students. Luonan and Shuelei both turned their heads to look outside the window. Heading northeast from here, passing through the gaps between the buildings, was the wetland jungle at the end of the ash-gray clouds. Right now it was also dark over there. The colors of the sky and the landscape were mixed together, and it was hard to distinguish them at first glance. Normally, Shuelei wouldn't mind looking at this scenery, but when he heard Luonan mention those arrangements, Shuelei couldn't help but think a bit more. It's in the forest right now, right?" "Yes, as a supervisor," Luonan replied without thinking. He suddenly laughed. "It's really useful." Shuelei was baffled. He looked at Luonan again, and felt that Luonan's smile was quite cold. It was very awkward. Luonan didn't speak any further. He stood up and walked to the side of the window, gazing into the distant wetland jungle. The sky was gloomy, and the long river that cut through the forest was not visible. It was like a long gray belt, half hidden and half visible, cutting into the depths of the forest. A few water birds flapped their wings and flew up. They could be considered agile, but the scale was far from what it was a few days ago. "Mutant. King Mutant. That fellow has destroyed this place. Our work will go back 10 years. When the water birds flew into the sky, a small wooden boat was sailing on the long river that cut through the forest. There were 4 people on the boat. 2 young men held wooden oars in their hands. They used the most primitive method to power the small boat. Right now they were so tired that their tongues were hanging out. They also had to endure the incessant grumbling of the old man. They wanted to jump into the river and commit suicide for a time. As for old man Wu Zuanliang, who had given them a great deal of mental pressure, he was already 90 years old this year, but his spirit was still hale and hearty. Even long periods of scientific research in the wild were as relaxed as taking a stroll. The sampling and research within the campus was unable to consume his excess energy, and this made his mouth even more idle. I can hear the noise of machinery even though I'm 2 kilometers away. This is undoubtedly pollution. Those people who issued the construction permit are all grandsons. The great upheaval a week ago had turned the ecosystem of the wetland jungle into a pot of porridge. The sudden cold wave was like adding hail to snow. It made the various departments of zoology, botany, ecology, genetics. Scholars, professors, and researchers wanted to cry but had no tears. At this time, some people who disregarded the vile situation and still carried out construction work within the jungle had undoubtedly become the target of loathing. Unfortunately, from a realistic point of view, their negative emotions were completely useless. The construction team at North Bank Gear had all kinds of documents. They held the permits of the Environmental Protection Department and the school. The construction process was also carried out in strict accordance with the relevant requirements. It was done impeccably. Wu Zuanliang had tried to take advantage of his seniority to call the construction team to stop, so as to avoid an even more fatal impact on the ecosystem of the wetland that was already on the verge of collapse. But the result left him very disappointed and very unhappy. He was unhappy and wanted to complain and vent. In any case, his wife wasn't at his side, so there was no one to reprimand. Before the 2 experimental dogs, who had changed jobs, went completely crazy, a tall woman wearing hunting clothes at the bow of the boat glanced back and said with a smile, "Teacher, in terms of age, there's nothing wrong with them calling you grandfather. It's just that suddenly having a bunch of big nephews gives me a headache." Old man Wu pointed at her. "At such a young age, you already want to be an aunt. Why don't you find a partner?" The one old pan introduced that something. "Teacher, if you can't remember, I can't remember either." The tall woman adjusted the brimmed hat on her head, and then her gaze cut to the 2 suffering experimental dogs. "Seniors, are you tired? Let's change hands?" "No need, no need." The 2 experimental dogs stuck out their tongues, shook their heads and wagged their tails, and simultaneously paddled with all their might a few times to prove that they still had strength to spare. The woman in hunting clothes didn't say anything else, and continued to chat with old man Wu. "Teacher Pan hasn't been in good health recently, and often suffers from insomnia. Given her personality, she'll think too much when something happens to North Bank Gear. It's better to take advantage of this mess and finish repairing it as soon as possible, so as to avoid more trouble in the future." Hearing the student mention his wife, old man Wu smacked his lips and said, "Don't worry about salty carrots," before he didn't say anything else. However, it didn't take long for Wu Zuanliang to look at the messy state of the jungle on both sides of the long river, and he couldn't help cursing again. Mutants are F*King exterminating things, and Cloud City Water Village actually does foster breeding? That dog's hit aquarium, I shouldn't have agreed. Help. Ah. Old man Wu's chest drooped, and he stomped his feet. With each word, the wooden boat rocked back and forth, threatening to capsize at any moment. The 2 experimental dogs' faces were deathly pale, and the woman in hunting attire at the bow of the boat pressed down on the brim of her hat, smiling as she watched him vent. As an old-school ecologist, Wu Zuanliang loathed mutants to the extreme. The devastation and continuous mutation of these monsters had destroyed the ecological theory of the Third World War, practically negating all the value of his life before the age of 50. In the following 40 years he continued to make achievements, and he had numerous works to his name. The people of the world gasped in admiration at his grand feat of changing the field of research in his old age, and climbing to new heights. Little did he know that his love for this field of study was about to be exhausted by the ugly and complex genes of the mutants. Acumen College's wetland jungle had been practically completely isolated from the influence of the mutants for the past few decades. It was one of the few places that could evoke the ideals of his original life. But now even this place had been ruined. Old man Wu truly felt that death was better than life. I'm going to write a letter to the school. No, I'm going to write a letter to the municipal government. Those grandsons of Cloud City Water Village. I'm going to punish them until they go bankrupt. If you want to write, then write. The woman in hunting attire echoed. At the same time, her gaze swept across the river shore, and she said with a light laugh, I'm actually more interested in that bald crow. With that kind of body, it's already surpassed a raven, right? I don't think a similar giant phenomenon has ever appeared before. Which one? When Old Man Wu turned his head to look, the large black-winged bird circling in the air had already disappeared into the depths of the forest, disappearing without a trace. It just so happened that the river curved at this moment, and the forest ahead was sparse. Another part of the lake had opened up, and one could faintly see gear standing on the north shore. It was covered in rust. When he truly saw the building, Old Man Wu, who had previously been muttering curses, became silent. He looked for a long time before turning his face and asking about the crow. Did you get a picture? It was sent to my mailbox. Teacher, I have an appointment, so I have to leave early today. Oh, you mentioned it yesterday. Go, there's nothing to do right now anyway. Oh, the four sides of this place aren't touching. Let young deer and the others row a bit more. The two experimental dogs' hearts were filled with tears, but they still had to agree. Yeah, it's a bit. Let's row a bit more. Just go straight to the shore. It's impossible for teachers' students to get lost in the forest. Old Man Wu laughed heartily. A moment later, the wooden boat neared the shore. The woman in hunting attire gracefully leapt ashore, and the small boat moved forward, pulling apart the distance. Old Man Wu shouted, Let's go home and eat tonight. No need, someone's taking care of our meals. The woman in hunting attire waved her hand, turned around, and entered the forest, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Old Man Wu sat back on the boat, and turned his head to look at the gear building on the opposite shore. He sighed and patted the side of the boat. Control the speed. Don't forget to take samples. In the span of a few days, the North Shore gear, which had burned quite a large area, had already more or less recovered from its exterior appearance. The overall feeling of having been scoured by time made it not require too much of an external appearance. The current project was mainly the installation and remodeling of the internal equipment. On the day of headquarters operation, the destruction caused by that damn tank had practically razed the central control room to the ground. When the Devil Ray had put out the fire, the water cannon it had released had also caused a large area of electrical circuit damage. All kinds of pipelines had to be buried anew. The construction workers and technicians were carrying equipment in and out. It was a scene of work in full swing. The bald crow flapped its wings to cushion its fall. It steadily landed on the railing of a viewing platform at the top of the building. From this position, it could see the figures of people entering and exiting the building. It could also see some areas inside the building through the glass. Inside the building, there was a construction worker pushing a high-precision imaging instrument. He openly walked around each floor of the building. From time to time, people would come over and input data obtained from other locations, continuously adjusting the parameters, and establishing a database that might be even more detailed than the design blueprints. The scope and intensity of the construction workers' work, when converted to value, already far exceeded the remuneration they received from the school. Chapter 336. It was 9:15 in the morning. The second morning class of Acumen College had already begun. The surrounding schools were more or less the same. The students, who were the main consumers, were bound to the campus. The streets of the large living area were relatively deserted. There were only magnetic rails extending out at low altitudes. Flying cars streaked past from time to time. Acumen College was located in the Pingjiang district. It could compete for the throne of the lowest average building height in Xia City. Even though Cloud City Water Village had a super tall building complex in the center, it only made the surrounding environment seem shorter and flatter. The crow flapped its wings and skillfully streaked through the gaps between the surrounding buildings. It soon locked onto the entrance to an underground parking lot. Taking advantage of the pedestrians not noticing, it practically stuck to the top of the doorway and flew in. It twisted left and right, and soon arrived at the underground third floor. It found its final target amidst the hundreds of parked cars. Amidst the flapping of its wings, the crow landed on the roof of a commoner's SUV. Its jet-black claws lightly knocked and the sunroof immediately opened, swallowing the crow inside. The car was filled with the aroma of beef. In the driver's seat, a robust middle-aged man held a bag of freshly baked roast beef. He directly stuffed a piece of maroon meat into his mouth. The enormous crow entered the car. When it retracted its wings, it smacked the man's head. He didn't even raise his head. He was very focused. The man's skin was red. This kind of skin color was quite common among Caucasians, but it felt a bit sickly on an Asian. He had a tuft of beard on his chin. It looked like an artist's beard, but it was placed on his face. It looked very crude. The crow sized up this person with curiosity. Then it stood in the front passenger seat. Its claws hooked onto the seat cushion. It stood quite steadily. Its enormous bird body already exceeded 70 centimeters. It stood in the front passenger seat at about the same height as a normal person sitting. The man turned his head to look after swallowing most of the meat in his mouth. He met the crow's jet-black pupils and went, "Oh." He freed a hand and rummaged through the storage box in the middle of the car. He took out a box and tilted the food packaging, pretending to pour it into the box. "Want to eat? If you want, I'll share some with you." This must be someone in the same trade. Otherwise, why would he treat a crow like this? This enormous crow was none other than Luo Nan's pet. It was also Luo Nan's earliest believer, Ink. Right now Luo Nan and Ink shared a view. He could control it, so Ink shook its head. "If you don't want to eat, then forget it." The man stuffed another piece of roasted beef into his mouth and chewed hard. Then he reached out and grabbed a rubber band-like object from the center console. He put it on his index finger and shook it. It was obvious that the material was flexible and had a purplish-red luster. It was very eye-catching. "Lift your leg." Luo Nan was very cooperative. He sent the command to Ink, and Ink jumped a bit. It raised a claw crookedly. The man used 2 fingers to pull open the rubber band and wrapped it around Ink's shins. Immediately, he tightened the band against the skin. With the claws blocking the lower part, it wouldn't fall off. There was a purplish-red circle around Chimo's foot, which was also quite eye-catching. From what Ink could sense, it didn't seem to be affected at all. As the man chewed on the meat, he mumbled, "This gadget is specially made. It's a communication device. It's very simple to use, and it's more suitable for you psychics. You'll know once you try it." A communicator strapped to his leg? Luo Nan pierced it with his mental strength, but there was no response. Then he interfered with the material plane a bit, immediately triggering a mechanism. The rubber band trembled slightly, sending out a corresponding signal. "Hello, hello?" There was no sound in the car. The middle-aged man in the driver's seat tapped his ears. "I hear you." So this was how it could be used. It was indeed quite convenient and effortless. Luo Nan reckoned that even if he didn't comprehend the coupling technique, he would still be able to realize external communication by relying on the paper-blowing interference power from before. Right now, there was only one question. Luo Nan asked through the communication rubber band. "Isn't it a bit roundabout? You can use the hexa ear, right?" Luo Nan still remembered the last time he and Kragburst acted together. The two used the hexa ear to communicate without hindrance on the psychic wave network. They were able to seamlessly connect to the society's large operation. Why did they need to open a new communication channel? That's your communication network. I can't reach it. In addition, your partner hasn't joined the society. That's all. Partner? Then you. Oh, what's your name, Master? My surname is Jean. Master Jean? Fourth tone. Good Jiang Jean. You can just call me Old Jean. In any case, I'm just a driver. Luo Nan felt that this person was a bit emotional. Perhaps his situation was similar to Worker Zhai's. He was a person within the circle, but he wasn't an awakened. It was normal for him to be a bit jealous. In any case, this person was a hired employee of the hidden indigo firm. Luo Nan didn't need to worry about his mental state. Zhang Yingying had played such a trick. She had Luo Nan hide behind the scenes and had the spiritually attached crow do the reconnaissance. There was nothing to criticize in terms of safety, but when it came to doing things, there was always a bit of mystifying. Luo Nen needed the cooperation of a partner. Originally, Luo Nan believed that this straightforward driver before him would be his future partner. But from the tone of his voice, it seemed that it was someone else. Knocking sounds rang out from the car window as he was pondering. Old Jean unlocked the door, and someone opened the door to sit in the back. The person wore a brimmed hat, and the shadow covered half of his face. He was quite mysterious, and he leaned back just as he sat down. His body movements were quite relaxed. Old Jean, my partner. Oh, a 70-centimeter bald crow. He's a giant. The person in the back swept his gaze over Ink, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. He immediately let out a gasp of admiration. Normal bald crows were around 50 centimeters in length when they reached adulthood. Ink's physique far exceeded that. Just a search on the internet would reveal this. But this person was able to distinguish the species of crows with a single glance, and was well versed in the relevant knowledge. He should be an enthusiast or a professional. The person took off the brimmed hat as they spoke. Her black hair hung down like a waterfall, setting off a bright and beautiful face full of vitality. It seemed to brighten up the dusky car. Yes, this was a woman. She looked very young, around 20 years old. Her skin was a healthy wheat color. It wasn't dark, but it revealed a bright luster of life. To use a common saying, she was full of collagen, displaying an abundance of vitality. She casually tied her hair into a high ponytail. It could be seen that she was quite tall. When she straightened her back, her head nearly touched the roof of the car. And the hunting clothes on her body were tight, making her figure appear all the more curvaceous. Old Jean, I'm not late, right? Look at the speed of the car. Old Jean gave a simple reply. Then he poured the entire roast beef from the bag into his mouth. His cheeks bulged as he chewed with force. He knocked on the control panel, and the car started up in smart mode, driving out of the underground parking lot. Luo Nan was speechless at such a bold way of eating. The beautiful woman in the back seat extended her hand over at this time. Luo Nan instinctively felt that she wanted to shake his hand and greet him. He wanted to order Ink to extend its wings in response, but the crow's head had already been struck. Then it was rubbed left and right. This crow isn't bad. Oh, or should I say spirit bird, lich or shikigami? Which one sounds better? Peony has brought along a communication device. You two can directly talk. Old Jean spoke vaguely, giving Luo Nan an introduction. Peony? Luo Nan touched the rubber band and gave it a try. Hi, Mr. Crow. Hello. Hello. In any case, Miss Peony, it would be even better if you could stop pressing on Ink's head. This giant is called Ink. That's easy to remember. It'll be easier to greet him in the future. Also, there's no need to add Miss. Peony is my nickname. Just call me directly. Then you can just call me Crow. According to Zhang Yingying's explanation, everyone participating in this operation didn't know his true identity, including his partner. Of course, this was another layer of insurance, so Luo Nan accepted it. Peony laughed. Her eyes were very beautiful, and the corners of her eyes were very long. There was a clear reclining silkworm under her eyes, and the color was bright and moist. When she laughed, her eyes would curve into exquisite crescent moons. It was very alluring. Okay. I'll leave Mr. to Ink. Mr. Ink sounds pretty good. Scratch. Ink's fuzzy self-awareness awakened when he heard someone say his name in succession. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice was unavoidably hoarse and unpleasant to the ears. This means that you've agreed, right? At this time, the civilian SUV they were riding in had already cut into the high-speed magnetic rail. According to the driving route, they needed to take a detour from Cloud City Water Village to rise into the sky. Crow shot a glance at the skyscrapers that towered into the clouds in the distance as he changed lanes. He especially looked at Ocean Sky Cloud City, which was at the very front. He couldn't see the details of the building from his position, but waves of tourists had come over since a week ago. They especially loved the viewing platform on the 142nd floor of Ocean Sky Cloud City. They stayed for half a day or even a day at a time. Not only did they use the viewing binoculars on the platform, they also brought all sorts of equipment with them. They watched with great delight. This group of tourists formed an interesting contrast with some of the construction workers of gear. There were also many types of data and information exchanged between them. It could be said that they thoroughly researched gear from the inside out. What was even more interesting was that the origins of these people were quite complicated from the current intelligence. There were at least 4 or 5 groups of financial backers. There were conflicts between them, but there were also collaborations. They each showed off their schemes and played to their heart's content. But no matter how they fought openly and covertly, these people all had a clear goal. They were all observing and speculating. Was there a deeper secret in this building called gear? Could they do something about it? Therefore, Luo Nan understood that gear seemed quiet right now, but it had already sunk into a turbulent undercurrent. Moreover, it was sinking deeper and deeper. As for why it was like this, the reason was still unclear. The pressure. Nothing was said along the way. 15 minutes later, the car drove into another underground parking lot. This place belonged to a certain business hotel in the city district. This area was connected to the recycling stratum. When the car went down, a dispirited and deranged figure wandered about on the other side of the thick wall. His line of sight was unable to penetrate the car and the thick wall, but the area with a radius of 30 meters was within the range of Ink's perception. It transformed into a detailed scene that was reflected in Luo Nan's mind several dozen kilometers away. Under pure observation mode, whether it was Luo Nan himself or his believers, their mental strength could penetrate through walls. There was nothing it couldn't reach. The only thing that could be limited was the limited range that they could cover. A radius of 30 meters. This was the current limit of Ink's natural perception. However, Luo Nan could also use telekinesis and other methods to temporarily expand it by a large margin. Luo Nan compared the relevant information and felt that this kind of ability was already enough. The car stopped precisely at the center of the parking lot. The elevator was right in front of it. Old Jean smacked his lips. He had already swallowed his beef clean. Get off the car. There's nothing else for me to do. Chapter 337. Under Old Jin's urging, Peony got out of the car first and put on her wide-brimmed hat once more. She raised her hand and fiddled with the back of her head a couple of times. Her high, knotted ponytail pierced through the top of her hat's buckle and swayed slightly. It was lustrous, bright, and beautiful, yet also appeared lively and dynamic. Right now, Luo Nan could confirm that Peony's figure was quite tall. She had the absolute figure of a model. At first glance, she could compete with his older cousin Emoya. In other words, they were more than 180 centimeters tall. This put a lot of pressure on the youth who was only about 170 centimeters tall. Fortunately, he didn't have to reveal it now. Ink jumped out from the side window, unfurled its wings, and with a slight turn flew forward. Luo Nan saw that the elevator had stopped on the ground floor. He pressed a button with his interference force in passing, and the elevator lights lit up. The doors opened just as Peony arrived. Thank you, Mr. Ink. Peony smiled unhurriedly, but she thanked the wrong target. However, when she smiled, the silkworm under her eye sockets became even clearer, outlining the shape of a crescent moon. The bottom of her eyes seemed to be shrouded by a light mist, misty and indistinct, making her look even more charming. Amidst her smile, Peony walked into the elevator and extended her hand to lightly brush her shoulder. Aren't you going to take a break? Luo Nan didn't express his opinion. Ink made its own decision. Perhaps it felt that the elevator was too narrow and that it couldn't spread its wings, so it simply landed on Peony's left shoulder. Wow, it's heavy. Be it from the perspective of species or the real world, Ink was indeed a big guy. At this moment, its 2 claws were hooked onto the shoulder of Peony's hunting clothes, and its wings were tucked in tightly. Otherwise, it would have forced Peony to tilt her head. The elevator went up and soon reached the 50th floor. There was a receptionist at the exit. When she saw Peony, especially the enormous crow on her shoulder, she stared blankly for a moment before coming forward to greet her. Hello, are you Lady Peony of the Hidden Indigo firm? Peony grunted. Her attitude was still quite adequate. When the receptionist's line of sight swept across Peony's pretty face, she was somewhat sluggish, but then her heart inexplicably chilled. He quickly attributed the reason to the crows. Let's not talk about whether the crow that occupied the shoulder of the beauty was majestic or not. Its posture was habitually leaning forward. Its height seemed fine, but its tail feathers and head formed a slanted line. It looked like someone was leaning forward and staring at you. The more one looked at it, the stranger its pitch-black eyes were. The receptionist couldn't help but take a step back. Realizing that she had lost her composure, she smiled awkwardly and took the opportunity to lean sideways. She gestured with her hand. "This way, please." Peony nodded and walked into the small conference room ahead. The room was about 40 square meters. The tables and chairs were arranged in an oval shape. The center was empty, and there was some equipment inside. At this time, the equipment was not turned on, but most of the chairs were already occupied. There were about 20 people. The appointed time was 9:30, and it was already 10:32. They were 2 minutes late, but the meeting hadn't started yet. It seemed like they weren't the only ones who were late. Seeing Peony come in with an enormous crow, everyone in the room turned their heads to size her up. Peony maintained her polite and distant smile. She withstood the gazes of everyone, and directly found a place to sit down. She also brought out a curious gaze and swept it over the faces of everyone in the room. Her body language was very relaxed. Ink jumped down from her shoulder, and stood on the table in front of her. Under Luo Nan's repeated warnings, Ink folded its wings and shut its mouth. It didn't utter a single sound, but its head twisted back and forth and its eyeballs followed suit. The beauty and the crow shifted their gazes and switched their targets at the same time. One person and one bird were brazenly watching the other participants. In the end, it was these people, who held the advantage in numbers, who couldn't take it anymore. They diverted their gazes one after another. Some of the people in the room had wanted to get closer to the beauty and greet her, but when they saw the situation, they dispelled these thoughts one after another. The atmosphere was bewildered and awkward. And so, of the 20 or so people in the conference room, only Peony's expression didn't change from beginning to end. Luo Nan couldn't help but admire her. He had Ink as a cover, and he was several dozen kilometers away. He had no misgivings. And Peony's performance was clearly experienced. She was calm and composed, unyielding, and imposing. I wonder what kind of work she does in the hidden indigo firm? Luo Nan discovered that he had been so busy these past few days that he was dizzy. He knew very little about his future partner. Right when he was pondering whether or not he should find Zhang Yingying and ask her for some information, the door rang out again. Another person entered the room. After a brief pause, the person walked straight over. The person simply pulled out a chair next to Peony. Only then did he bow and smile. "Can I sit here?" "Feel free." Peony turned her face to the side and roughly sized up the person. She didn't refuse. The person sat next to Peony. He was a young man wearing casual clothes. His semi-long curly hair was quite eye-catching. The ends of his hair hung down to his shoulders, and it was a bit fluffy. His complexion was extremely fair, and he wore an earring in the middle of his left ear. Luo Nan was certain that this bro's stylist was absolutely amazing. Not only did he not look like a sissy, he even used his hairstyle to further embellish the lines of his slightly mixed blood cheeks. This matched his healthy physique with wide shoulders and narrow waist. He had quite a manly air, and he had the style of an aristocrat from the old European royal families. After the person sat down, he first introduced himself. "Hello. My surname is Long. I'm ranked 7th. My friends call me Long 7. I just joined this group. I'll take the liberty to ask for your name. You can just call me Peony." "Peony." Long 7's gaze swept across Peony's cheeks. In the end, it landed on her wide-brimmed hat. "I'm guessing that you're a student of Acumen College." Luo Nan was caught off guard. Only then did he discover that he had been overthinking things. From beginning to end, he had just been conversing with Peony. Peony didn't have any ill feelings toward this handsome mixed-blood kid. A smile blossomed from the corner of her eyes. She asked very cooperatively, "What's the reason?" Please forgive me for speaking bluntly. As an amateur team formed from students, Jungle Owl has just entered the main WCG tournament. They've only participated in the 10 days in the wilderness event. Their results are even more lackluster. The majority of their peripheral products will only be digested within Acumen College. Only now did Luonen notice that the wide-brimmed hat Peony was wearing had a logo in the shape of a nightingale on the front. Presumably, this was the logo of the so-called Jungle Owl. It can't be that bad. Jungle Owl's Pippi is very good-looking. He has a lot of fangirls both inside and outside the school. Peony's body leaned a bit more to the side. She propped an elbow on the table, and her fingertips pushed against the brim of the wide-brimmed hat. This careless action made the hat tilt a bit, but it gave her an even more carefree and casual air. Long Seven didn't say anything, but the eyeballs of the other participants who were sneaking glances at them nearly popped out. Next, Peony and Long Seven really did chat about topics related to esports. It was just that Long Seven was very familiar with the styles, members and battle records of each team. Peony was more interested in the good-looking people of each team, regardless of gender. I really do care about good-looking people. Other people watch the live broadcast of fights, but I watch the highlights, interviews and so on. Peony didn't hide her hobby at all. She giggled in extreme delight. Long Seven was just about to speak when he suddenly froze. Peony propped up her chin with one hand and extended the other under his startled gaze. Her slender fingers lightly brushed past the locks of hair at the side of Long Seven's temples. It seemed to even touch his skin. Of course, you're not bad either. The ambiguity level was off the charts. The thrill level was off the charts. The vast majority of people in the conference room were eavesdropping and peeking at the conversation between the handsome man and the beautiful woman. Some people were caught off guard by Peony's actions. They drew in a cold breath. There were also some people whose eyes lit up with raging flames. The reason for this was that grass had grown in their hearts. Long Seven instantly recovered from his astonishment. He instinctively reached out to grab Peony's probing fingers, but he was still half a step too late. Peony's slender hand noiselessly pulled back, but her thumb and forefinger were pinching a dazzling silver earring. It was the one on Long Seven's ear. Seeing the object on Peony's fingertips, Long Seven's complexion became grave for the first time since they met. "Miss Peony. Just call me Peony." Amidst this seemingly familiar conversation, Peony's posture didn't change. She merely pinched the earring and brought it closer to her eyes, sizing it up in detail. Later on, her fingers clearly exerted more force, but the earring that resembled a fine loop didn't react. Long Seven's complexion was heavy. Just as he was about to say something, the beauty in front of him extended her slender hand again and delivered it to his eyes. "It's a pretty good earring. Is it platinum?" Long Seven didn't answer Peony's question. In the first instant, he took back the earring and put it back on his ear. His taut face relaxed a little, but he could no longer return to his previous cheerful state. The atmosphere became increasingly strange. Ink sensed the change in the atmosphere. It subconsciously flapped its wings and even dropped a feather. Peony casually picked it up and giggled as she poked Ink's head. She minded her own business and played happily. It seemed that she didn't take Long Seven's change in attitude to heart in the slightest. What a self-centered woman. Just as Luonen made his initial judgment, another person walked into the conference room. He stood directly at the front of the oval conference table and swept his gaze across the conference room. He nodded and said, "Everyone's here. Let's start the meeting." The last person to enter had an elderly appearance. He was at least 70 years old, but his posture was ramrod straight. His self-introduction was full of energy, and his voice was sonorous. "I am Wu Bin, the executive director of Trigate Corporation. I am also the person in charge of this project and the organizer of the team. I will be the one to coordinate the specific operations of the project for some time to come. There are 2 trustworthy professionals present here, and there are also the elites of the company. They all possess formidable strength. I believe that this maintenance operation will certainly achieve satisfactory results." Wu Bin's words were a bit bureaucratic, but this was in line with Trigate Corporation's judgment of having a military background. Wu Bin's words were inflexible, but this didn't mean that his brain was rigid. Wu Bin knew very well that this was the first time the experts he had invited were meeting with the members of the team. They needed to have an intuitive understanding. He took advantage of this opportunity to point at the subordinate beside him. "We'll start with you. Make a self-introduction." The subordinate suddenly stood up. He was just about to speak when Peony raised her hand from the middle of the conference table. Her fingertips were still holding the inky and translucent blue crow feather. "Director Wu, the Hidden Indigo firm hopes that you can explain the personnel composition of the operation team first. According to the contract signed between the firm and your esteemed company, we should be the sole professional instructors and commanders." "Two professionals? What do you mean by that?" Her words silenced the pitiful subordinate. He could only look stupidly at Wu Bin. "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."